The story begins with a person wearing a special armor suit, engaged in battle against monsters who appear to outnumber and overpower the humans, causing great concern. Holding their heavy ammunition, they opened fire on the monsters, resulting in the demise of many of them. However, suddenly a brilliant light emanates from the monster's core, revealing a colossal dragon emerging from within, leaving the person utterly shocked. Recognizing the impossibility of defeating this creature, the person drops their weapon and sits on the ground. Approaching closer, the dragon exhales a formidable flame, engulfing the individual and causing their armor to get destroyed. This subjects them to intense agony, leaving their comrade in shock. Sitting in his office, the comrade holds his head in disappointment, realizing that the haunting nightmare from the past is returned. Suddenly a realization dawns on him, and he thinks that it's the day when the last batch of recruits is supposed to arrive. Just then a few helicopters descend upon ARC, the renowned Psycho Association. In one of the helicopters sits a 10-year-old child named Lee Han, hailing from a humble background but displaying exceptional talent. He recalls the astonishment of the army official who encountered him as the leader of a criminal group called the War Orphan Group at such a young age. The official, recognizing Han's remarkable abilities, deemed him highly valuable, and instead of sending him to jail, he decided to send him to ARC. Curious if he was one of those psychic superhumans, Han asked the official. In response, the official revealed that he was not an ordinary individual but someone who could potentially become humanity's savior. The official explained that Hem would enjoy all the luxuries of life at ARC. However, Han raised a concern, stating that he would be the only one enjoying those luxuries while his younger siblings would not. Therefore, he requested that the organization take responsibility for his younger siblings' welfare, including food, clothing, shelter, and education, if they wanted him to join ARC. After some contemplation, the army official agreed, promising to shoulder all the responsibilities of Han's younger siblings as long as he remained at ARC. Recalling this, Han stands up from his seat as the helicopter prepares to land. Finally, the helicopter touches the ground and the door swings open. As Han gazes at the association before him, he remembers the army official's words about his abilities not being of the highest rank, and that he will need to work hard to survive. As he steps out of the helicopter and walks toward the building, determined to prove himself, he suddenly hears a commotion behind him. Turning around, he finds a crowd of children gathered around someone. In the midst of the crowd stands a boy tormenting a young child, asserting that he lacks any ability and was brought there against his will. He blames the new recruits like the child for being treated equal to him and finds it disgusting. In response, the other children in the crowd begin to shout, protesting his remarks. Seething with anger, he charges his hands with his power and lifts rocks from the ground, showcasing his psychic abilities as a result of his training. Witnessing the rocks floating in the air, the children are astonished as it's their first time witnessing a psychic ability. Holding a stone, the boy turns to the child on the ground, stating that he'll be sent home if injured and asserting that ARC is no place for someone like him to survive. He implies that the child will be grateful to him in the future and sends the stone in his direction. However, just before it can hit the child, Han arrives and catches it, remarking on its slow speed, leaving the child astonished. Surprised by Han's ability to block the stone, the boy inquires about his identity. In response, Han states that he is his etiquette teacher and tosses the stone to the ground. Shortly after, a physical confrontation between the two begins, attracting the attention of the other children, who enjoy the spectacle and cheer Han on. Approaching them, a muscular army official shouts loudly, causing them to turn and see him advancing. With an angry expression on his face, the person instructs both Han and the other boy to step forward. Annoyed by their fighting amongst each other, the soldier asks for their names. In response, the boy introduces himself as Del Simon, and Han also introduces himself. Looking at Del following the proper code of conduct of the association, the soldier remarks that he seems to have received his training and asks if his ability is manifested. In response, he states that he can only use telekinesis so far, while Han watches them with confusion, unable to understand the jargon they use. Hearing Del's reply, the soldier punches him in the stomach so hard, causing him to experience intense pain, and asks why he was trying to act arrogant with only this level of abilities. While Han is in shock, the soldier turns to him, stating that he liked the fact that he stood up for the weak. However, even then he punches Han forcefully, stating that if he is not even as capable as Del, he is useless. As Han crashes to the ground, the soldier turns to the other children, stating that they will become first year soon, and if they are unable to use telekinesis by then, they will be expelled. With that, the person introduces himself as John Red, stating that he is their instructor and will be training them to transform them into psychic warriors capable of fighting dragons. Stating that they should start right away, John instructs them to run laps around the training ground until he stops them and tells them to start running. After some time, while the children keep on running, Han seems pretty comfortable, thinking that he is used to such activities. Meanwhile, various other children start falling to the ground, having lost all their stamina, causing their instructor to expel them one by one. Watching the children get expelled, Han thinks that he can endure tough training but is worried about his psychic abilities. Meanwhile, Del, who is running at a distance from him, wonders if he will be able to display the same level of ability as Han did. Meanwhile, the child who was being bullied by Del also loses all this stamina and falls to the ground with tears welling up in his eyes. Watching him lying on the ground, John comes to him telling him to go home and rest if he cannot endure such tough training, causing him to become disappointed. Just then Han comes to him and helps him get up, stating that he cannot go home like that since he has not given up, and turns to the child asking if it is not the case, and he agrees. Hearing that, the soldier becomes silent, while Han helps the boy proceed forward, giving him a shoulder. After some time, the soldier tells them to stop, causing them all to crash to the ground, badly exhausted. Counting them again, the soldier states that they were originally 73, out of which only 40 are left after the trial. Stating that this is all for that day, the soldier tells them that they will start the real training the next day, in which they will have to run the same number of laps as they did every morning. Hearing that, all of the children except Han become shocked. The next day, at 5 o'clock in the morning, John starts the training, making the children run once again, with Del and Han leading them while competing with each other. At 8 o'clock a.m. they are given their breakfast, 1 hour after which they go to attend their lecture. After attending the lecture with interest, Han goes to the mess with the other children and receives his lunch. Taking the lunch from the counter, he goes to Kiro, the boy he helped, and states that they should eat together. In response, Kiro smiles, while Han thinks that he is his first friend in Ark as well as in life. While they are busy talking, Del comes from behind holding his tray and gives a cold gaze to Han, causing him to reciprocate the same. While Del moves on to the other children, Kiro reveals that he is a child who received a gifted education in the United Kingdom. Although he does not want to admit it, Han states that Del is a child who can use all the abilities and expresses the need for them to learn telekinesis within 3 weeks. In response, Kiro reveals that he can already use telekinesis, making Han astonished. After having their afternoon lectures, combat training, and evening run, they have their dinner, showers, and attendance and go to the dormitory for rest. Lying on his bed, Han tries to fall asleep but is unable to do so, despite this place being incomparably nicer than the one he used to live in. He misses his home and wants to go back but dismisses the idea, thinking that he cannot be so weak. After 2 weeks, a lot of children become capable of using telekinesis, but Han cannot perform it no matter how hard he tries. Anxious about what to do, Han realizes that there is only one person who can help him in that matter, which is Del. The next day, while Del is sitting with his friend, Han comes to him, causing him to laugh, rudely asking what is the case. In response, Han states that he is already aware of it, causing him to laugh, remarking that he is standing a little too tall for making a request and should be a little respectful. Despite feeling enraged at that, Han thinks that his pride is not something important at the moment and gets on his knees, making Del surprised. In a respectful tone, Han then requests that he teach him the telekinesis method, causing him to stay silent in response for a while, before telling him to get up, stating that he should not complain about his methods. Later, Del asks his friend to give him a pencil. Taking the pencil, Del goes straight to Han and pierces it in his heart, causing him to become shocked at this unexpected act. The following day, John gazes out of his window while smoking a cigarette, realizing that it's already the day of the incorporation ceremony. While he is lost in thought, someone unexpectedly opens the door and enters, calling out to him. Turning around, John recognizes the person as Octo, one of his colleagues. Octo, looking at John smoking a cigarette, feels disgusted, which annoys John in return. Taking a seat, Octo inquires about his new recruits, but John responds that all of them seem useless, surprising Octo, stating that there are only 2 of them who seem useful. John reveals the first one to be Del, who despite having a crass personality has power beyond the level of a first-year student. Upon hearing this, Octo identifies Del as a student from the Royal Psyker institution in the United Kingdom and expresses high expectations for him. John then recalls the other recruit Han describing him as an honorable kid with superior mental qualities compared to the rest. Although John regards Han as strong as a soldier, he emphasizes that Han is merely human and not a superhuman, and if he cannot use psychic powers he cannot stay there. Hearing that, Octo changes the subject, asking if John knows what the kids call him, and he agrees, stating that it must be some weird name, causing him to smile in response. Sometime later, John stands before the rows of students announcing their imminent entry into the first year, but clarifying that it only applies to those ready to become psykers. Hearing this, Kiro looks nervously at Han, knowing he still can't use telekinesis. Meanwhile, John explains that their test will be based on outer manifestation, explaining that those who can use the ability of telekinesis can remain and the rest can leave. John points to Octo, instructing those with telekinesis abilities to line up in front of him and directing those without abilities to the personnel and a helicopter on standby to take them home. Among the personnel, Han spots Major Kong, the person responsible for sending him to Ark while looking after his younger siblings. Meanwhile, John urges the children to hurry and move in their respective directions, causing some to excitedly run towards the technician while others sadly approached the helicopters. While Han stands still among them, Kiro calls out to him anxiously. Hearing his voice, Han closes his eyes and puts his hand on his heart, remembering how Del pierced a pencil into his heart, and he's shocked by this sudden unexpected act. Han crashed to the ground and held his heart, asking if it was not similar to an attempt to kill him. Holding the blood-stained pencil in his hand, Del assured him that it was not a deep wound, telling him not to worry and to focus better. With some pain, he revealed that this injury would become his psychic channel. Leaving Han surprised, Del explained that he could imagine pulling out his psychic energy through that injury, which is not something he could do by just grasping his chest for days on end. With that, he moved back to his friend while Han looked at him with astonishment, realizing that Del was aware of the fact that his core was at his heart. Remembering that, hand holds his heart tightly, thinking that he is now able to feel the psychic energy, but becomes confused about how to pull it out. While he is thinking, John calls out to him, stating that he is the only one left and telling him to quickly move. Ignoring the call, Han stands there with his eyes closed, trying to figure out how to access his psychic energy, causing Kiro to become increasingly anxious. Growing enraged by Han's disregard for orders, John angrily approaches him, causing the other students to watch in fear. Reaching near him, John states that the orders of a superior for a soldier are absolute and raises his hand in the air in order to launch a punch, stating that there are no exceptions. Watching that, Han becomes anxious, thinking that he really needs to do something, when he suddenly notices a pen in John's pocket. Just then, John launches a forceful punch at him, causing him to crash to the ground at a distance. Thinking that has no other choice but to do that, Han looks at the pen he managed to take out of John's pocket. While John and other children watching confusion, he pierces the pen into his heart, thinking that he will need to make the deeper to pull out more energy. Watching that, John angrily grabs him from his clothes, asking if he has a death wish. Dropping down the pen after getting a deep wound on his body, Han is unable to channel his energy, causing him to become disappointed and lower his head. See psychic energy in his eyes. Taking a side, John remarks that he has never seen someone as untalented as him and drops him on the ground, moving away. After walking a few steps, he turns around again, congratulating Han, which makes him confused. Having been allowed to enter the first year, Han gets up and moves toward the line of telekinesis ability users while Kiro runs to him asking if he is all right, and he agrees. Octo, who is standing at a distance, gives him a wristwatch, stating that it is a token of passing, making him confused. Looking at the watch, Han realizes that it is the bracelet terminal with his number and arc state-of-the-art technology, and wearing it will complete his registration automatically. Thinking all that, he remarks that it is incredible, and Octo agrees, stating that it has many different functions. Just then, John calls out to all of them, stating that the class allocation will soon be complete and telling them to gather in their classes after checking it. He explains that each grade in ARC is split into 4 classes from A to D, based on abilities. The allocations were made based on the results of the 3-week training, but they can always advance to the next grade or class if they are skilled enough. Congratulating the remaining 25 students, John states that they must have thought of him as a weird person up until now. However, stating that they were wrong about that, John reveals that he is even weirder than their thoughts. With that, the children are divided into the 4 classes, with Del being the only one in Class A. while Kiro gets the B class along with 4 other children. Stating that these 5 people will follow him, he divides the remaining 20 students into classes C and D, with Han attaining the D class. John then tells them that the instructor for these 20 people is going to be Wei Chen and points to a muscular person standing beside him, causing the children to become scared of this huge figure. However, just then Wei Chen smiles and introduces himself as a weapon art instructor, stating that they will surely be doing their best with each other's collaboration. Hearing his encouraging words, the children become surprised, realizing that he is a gentle person in contrast to what they were expecting. With that, John instructs his students to start moving, causing them to line up and begin walking. While walking away, Del comes across Han, who stands still looking at him, but he moves on without saying anything. Following him is Kiro, who looks at Han with a sad expression on his face. Looking at how worried he is, Han tells him not to feel this way, assuring him that he will soon come to his class, causing him to smile and confidently move away. As the students of classes A and B leave, Wei Chen turns to his own students, stating that they should go to the gym. After some time at the gym, Wei Chen holds a huge stick and swings it with swift precision, showing his astonishing acrobatic moves, which leave the children amazed. After showing them his skills, he states that they must be curious about why they are learning to use weapons to face a dragon, and explains that it is because they need to use psychic equipment. He reveals that no material on Earth contains psychic energy, but a dragon skin or bone can contain this energy and transmit it. He explains that this is the reason why weapons made of dragons can inflict serious injuries on dragons. Hearing Han asked how they used to defeat the dragons when this equipment did not exist. In response, Wei Chen reveals that they used to throw bodies at the dragons at that time, which caused them to lose hundreds of psykers to a single dragon. He explains that there are also psykers who attack and support from a long distance. But in order to kill one must use a melee weapon. This is because they need to plunge the weapon into its vital point and release energy. He reveals that the type of psyker who performs this role is known as a striker, causing them to astonished. Pointing to a stand behind him, he states that all of them need to choose their weapons that day. Hearing that, Han goes to the stand and picks a wooden spear for himself, causing Wei Chen to ask if he likes the spear. Agreeing, Han states that he likes the refreshing wind it creates when he swings it and the sound it makes as well. Hearing that, Wei Chen remembers his ability to judge and adapt that he showed with John and Del, considering it to be extraordinary, thinking that he must have lived through extreme circumstances. Wei Chen smiles, realizing that aside from being unfortunate, he has the potential. Therefore, he turns to Han, wishing him the best of luck and stating that he will be helping him in the training process. Hearing that, Han smiles and looks at the spear, determined to learn as much as he can from the training. 2 weeks later, while Han's busy sparring with his classmate, he remarks that his classmate is looking tired and ends the battle by surrendering. In response, his classmate states that he seems to be the one trying to buy time and rest. With that, he brings the spear close to Han, attempting to launch an attack. But Han quickly blocks it and launches a counter-attack, leaving Joyce surprised. Following that, he causes Joyce to drop his spear and lose against him. Accepting his defeat, Joyce states that he learned a lot from him and wants him to become the class representative after he ascends to C class the next week. In response, Han states that he cannot become the class representative only because he wants to. However, Joyce states that everyone will be following him, revealing that they have already decided it amongst themselves, causing him to smile in response and thank them, thinking that becoming a class representative can make him one step closer to moving to the next class. Han goes to John to discuss it, who refuses to make him the class representative. The next day, one of the psykers sitting in the gym discusses John, mentioning that John has a very bad temper and has defeated him countless times. Remembering those challenging days, they continue their exercises when another person comes running to inform them about John's battle against a first-year student. Meanwhile, on the training ground, Han stands with a pointed stick in his hand, facing John, who charges his hand with his combustion ability and lights a cigarette. Watching from the dormitory windows, senior students encourage Han to defeat John, eagerly anticipating the battle. Hearing their comments, John feels annoyed, while Han stands confidently before him, anger in his eyes. He remembers the previous night when John had come to their room asking if the rest of his classmates wanted to let someone like him, who couldn't even use telekinesis properly, lead them. In response, all his classmates remain silent, prompting John to suggest they must have a reason to appoint him, calling out to Han. He broke a mop and hurled its stick towards him, while Han caught it in confusion. John mentioned hearing that Han was the best in combat in his class and challenged him to spar to showcase his skills, causing Han to remark that the edge of the stick was very sharp. Hearing that, John asked if Han expected him to get injured by the spearmanship of a novice like him, and he disagreed. Remembering this, Han looks at John, who throws away his shirt, ready for the battle. Confused, Han asks if John intends to fight him barehanded, to which John agrees, freezing, stating he won't take the fight with the child seriously. Throwing away the cigarette, he explains that Han will win if he makes any part of his body aside from his feet touch the ground, causing Han to ask about the conditions for him to lose. In response, John says that Han has to admit defeat in order to lose, prompting Han to smile and claim he will lose in that case. With that, the battle begins, and Han swings his spear, ready to launch an attack, while John stands defensively, waiting for the attack. As they watch, the other students become confused, wondering if they are fighting for real and remarking that it would be impossible for a child to defeat a powerful instructor. Hearing their remarks, Del, who is passing by, tells them to move aside and comes to the window, watching Han and remarking that he is crazy. Meanwhile, Han launches countless attacks, all of which John effortlessly blocks with his bare body. After blocking the attacks for some time, John takes action, grabbing Han by his clothes and launching a forceful kick into his stomach, causing intense pain. As Han crashes to the ground from the hit, John raises his foot, preparing to strike again, but Han dodges the attack and moves backward, regaining his balance. Shocked by the fierce attack, Han thinks that John intended to kill him with that move. Observing Han's expressions, John remarks that his face reveals that dragons and minions plot everything, regardless of their opponent's strength. He explains that monsters never go easy on anyone just because they are weak. Hearing this, Han calls out to him, asking if he is going to fight with words, surprising John. Rushing toward Han to launch another attack, John notes Han's determination to keep going. Grabbing Han's shirt again, John swings him up in the air and throws him, causing Han to crash to the ground from a distance. Just then, John notices a cut on his face, wondering when Han managed to inflict it. Meanwhile, all the other students continue to encourage Han to defeat John as he charges forward once again. Realizing he needs to be vigilant, John stands still, while Han quickly moves behind him. Leaping up to launch an attack, John barely manages to dodge after dodging a few more similar attacks. John realizes that Han is using momentum and centrifugal force to attack and understands why Wei Chen likes him. Smiling, he thinks that he has also started to take a liking to Han. Meanwhile, Han charges forward at great speed once again and launches an attack. In response, John stands still, deciding to face it head-on. But to his shock, the attack is so fierce that it causes the wooden stick to pierce through his body, enraging him. Grabbing Han by the neck, he decides to put an end to the fight and raises him up in the air, telling him to surrender, which causes Han to experience intense agony. Watching him endure the pain, the other children remarked that he is going too far. Meanwhile, John tells him to surrender if he wants to remain alive and charges his hand with his combustion ability. However, despite the increasing torture, Han refuses to give up and keeps screaming in pain. At that moment, Wei Chen comes running to them, asking if John intends to kill Han and telling him to stop. John, stating that Han has not surrendered and he himself is not lost, becomes confused and asks what to do in that case. Lifting Han up from the ground, Wei Chen turns to John, stating that he has gotten fed up with Ark's way of education. In response, John is silent for some time and then tells him to be quiet, moving away. He states that since Han did not surrender, he will consider it his victory, remarking that Wei Chen can't train them by always protecting them. John states that since Han overcame the trial by himself and proved his skill, he will be promoted to Class B after healing. Upon hearing his promotion to Class B, one of John's comrades becomes surprised. John explains that this update will soon be posted on the promotion list, causing his comrade to ask if the superiors will allow the promotion from Class D to Class B. In response, John states that Han is already good enough to be promoted to Class A, with only his psychic potential holding him back. However, his comrade argues that the superiors prioritize psychic potential above everything else, leading John to remark that their standards are useless. According to him, What one needs to defeat a dragon is not psychic ability but a strong mentality to the weapon under extreme fear. In that aspect, he considers Han to have the greatest potential to become a striker and deems him too valuable a talent to let rot just because he is a late psychic bloomer. He further states that Han even has the capability to become the savior of the world, leaving his comrades surprised and asking if he didn't use to dislike him. Disagreeing, John states that he rather likes Han, which surprises his comrade. On the 7th day of hospitalization, Han's instructor, Wei Chen, comes to check up on him but keeps standing outside the door, and he, causing the doctor to ask if he will not go in. Looking at the basket in his hand, she inquires about its contents, shows her the fruits and milk inside, explaining that they are for Han. Observing this, she asks why Wei Chen is just standing outside, and he points to Han inside the room practicing telekinesis, stating that he does not want to distract him. Meanwhile, Han continues to apply his internal energy to the ball placed in front of him, attempting to lift it. As they watch with curiosity, Han successfully transfers his energy to the ball, bringing joy to Wei Chen and the doctor. Wei remarks on Han's amazing concentration, then goes inside with the doctor and calls out to Han. Happy to see his instructor, Han says he is all right. Taking his seat, Wei Chen tells him that he has brought some snacks for him, handing over the fruits and milk. Wei mentions that Han will be returning as a student of Class B the next day and expresses astonishment at Han working on his telekinesis skill all this time. Han explains that his psychic grade is below average, so he wants to be proficient in its use before getting discharged. Wei Chen praises this decision, stating that all psykers should be able to use telekinesis to some extent, even if they excel in armed combat. Wei further explains that since most battles of psykers occur in the air, telekinesis will help retrieve a dropped weapon during combat. Getting a wonderful idea, Wei Chen goes to the reception to request permission to take Han outside for a short time. After receiving permission, he takes Han to the gym, leaving him confused. Wei Chen explains that given his psychic development speed, it is highly unlikely that Han will ever manifest a unique ability. Chen adds that Han cannot even dream of having abilities like combustion or teleportation if he continues on this path, shocking Han. In that case, Wei suggests that Han hone his telekinesis skill to the utmost limit and make it his unique ability. While Han finds the idea of specializing in telekinesis appealing, Chen reveals that telekinesis is like muscles becoming stronger with use in training. Chen emphasizes that the ranks based on psychic ability are delusions, and Han possesses a regeneration ability even greater than theirs. Therefore, he encourages Han to never give up and to keep training. The next day, Han stands at the door of the B class, feeling a little nervous before entering, taking a deep breath. He is about to enter the class when someone opens the door and comes out, causing him to collide with Han. Confused, the boy looks at him, holding his nose, and recognizes him, making Han surprised, stating that everyone in the class already knows him. The boy introduces himself as Dmitry Vladimirovich Petra, the representative of Class B, shaking hands with him. Han asks if he will have to use his complicated name every time they talk, to which the boy tells him to call him Dmitry, stating that they have been given free time for arm sparring. Dmitry tells Han to follow him and takes him to the gym. At the gym, Han thinks that armed combat is his favorite type of training, allowing him to release stress from the strict curriculum, his lack of psychic ability, and the fear of expulsion. Therefore, he picks up a spear from the stand and goes towards his classmates, defeating all of them with his swift moves within an instant. However, while doing that, he wonders if it is fun to bully others and looks at Kiro, his friend, sitting on the ground trembling with fear, thinking that his specialty is his psychic ability. While Kiro looks at him in confusion, Han wonders if it is fine to take advantage of the weaknesses of others, looking at all of his classmates lying on the ground. He tells them to be grateful that they were not sparring during an actual training session. Watching him, Dmitry becomes surprised, thinking that he was expecting Han to show such power and a desire to fight him for real. A few moments earlier, Kiro was lying on the ground with his wooden sword in front of him, when one of his classmates approached him, telling him to attack, pushing him away. The second classmate stepped forward, stating that it was now his turn, while Kiro remained on the ground, calling for help as his classmates continued to line up to torture him. Kiro felt his strength continuously waning all the while calling for help. Remembering Han, his only friend who had saved him. Just then, Han appeared from behind, holding a spear and began knocking all of them down one by one. Recalling this, Kiro looks at Han with astonishment, wondering if he's even a real human being, and calls out to express his gratitude. Meanwhile, Han asks Dimitri if this is how Class B conducts its sparring. In response, Dimitri explains that this is how things work at art, emphasizing that their enemies don't go easy on them just because they're weak. Dimitri refers to Han as the odd one in the class who helps the weak instead of attacking them. He explains that blindly helping Kiro will only lead to his death, causing Han to become frustrated. However, he still considers it a little unfair for three people to gang up against a weak person. Considering that, he turns to Han, stating that they should show them what a true spar is like. Hearing this, Han tightens his grip on his spear and asks if Dimitri really wants to fight. After a few moments, Dimitri leaps into the air and launches a forceful attack, which Han blocks with his spear. Considering the power of the attack, he thinks that the spear is going to break if he tries to block such an attack. Once again, therefore, he swings his spear, deciding to parry him and make him lose his balance. With that, he launches a strike on Dimitri's leg, stating that the battle will now be over. However, instead of falling to the ground, Dimitri maintains his balance, dodges the next attack, and gets closer, hitting Han with his head. This causes Han to crash to the ground, remarking that such tricks aren't permissible during arm sparring. Dimitri reveals that he has been learning a powerful Russian martial art since he could walk, and he warns Han that his sword isn't the only thing he should be concerned about. Getting back on his feet, Han asks if Dimitri intends to defeat the dragon with his martial arts as well. In response, Dimitri states that he could try to strangle the dragon with his skills if things go wrong. Meanwhile, all the other classmates support Dimitri, referring to him as the tiger cub of Siberia, which makes Dimitri overconfident. As Han observes them conversing, he realizes that despite their harsh words, their intentions aren't malicious. He feels a strong bond among them with Dimitri at its center, and looks at Kiro standing aside, lowering his head, realizing that he's an outcast in his class. While Han's looking at Kiro, Dimitri calls out to him, reminding him not to ignore his opponent during the fight. This prompts Han to turn around quickly and block Dimitri's attack, thinking that he shouldn't prolong the fight. Han stands facing Dimitri, who moves forward to launch another attack, striking his spear onto the ground. Han jumps upward, believing that this attack will be enough to defeat Dimitri. To everyone's astonishment, Dimitri comes down at great speed and launches an attack. However, instead of retaliating, Dimitri simply strikes Han's spear with his sword and breaks it, leaving Han wondering the reason behind this act. At that moment, Dimitri swiftly moves, in holding Han up and slams him onto the ground with his martial arts skill. Tightening his grip on Han's arm, Dimitri warns him to surrender if he doesn't want to lose his arm and begins to pull it, causing Han to experience intense pain. Trembling with pain, Han challenges Dimitri to break his arm if he has the guts to do it, which infuriates Dimitri, taking it as a challenge. Dimitri indeed breaks Han's arm, leaving all his classmates in shock as he lies on the ground feeling intense pain. Dimitri states that he already told him to surrender, causing Kiro's eyes to well up with tears. Turning around, Dimitri tells Han not to cry with his broken arm, and looks back at him, standing behind him, instructing their other classmates to take him to the infirmary. However, just then Han strikes Dimitri on the head with a stick, remarking that everyone he has encountered before must have cried when their arms were broken, looking at him lying on the ground. Han challenges him to continue the match and looks at his broken stick, while Dimitri gives a thumbs up on his effort and loses consciousness. After some time, Dimitri regains consciousness and finds himself in a hospital room. Hearing the sound of a notification, he turns around and finds Han sitting beside him with his broken arm, checking a video message he has received. The message is from Major Kong, the person who sent him to Ark, expressing appreciation for his performance and sharing a video of his siblings going to school. Overwhelmed with happiness upon seeing his siblings living a good life and gaining weight, Han calls out to Dimitri, asking if he can swipe through the photos, to which Dimitri agrees. While Dimitri is swiping through the photos in his album, he becomes annoyed and questions why he has to do that. Han replies that it's because he is the one who has broken his arm. In response, Dimitri states that He is also responsible for cracking his head by attacking like a coward, but Han replies that it was his fault to let his guard down, causing him to feel annoyed. Stating that he was only angry that day, Han clarifies that he has no bad feelings towards him, and Dmitri replies the same along with a desire to fight with him until the end next time. Thinking something, Han states that he feels like he made a mistake against Kiro that day by starting to fight instead of extending his hand towards him. Stating that he understands his feelings, Dmitri reveals that he will immediately die when he reaches level 2, making Han confused about its reason. Leaving the room, they begin walking down the corridor, with Han repeatedly asking where they are heading. Dmitri instructs him to see for himself and leads him to the emergency medical center, explaining that it's a place where he will stay as long as he is still breathing. Suddenly, they pass a stretcher carrying a badly injured psyker from Ark, leaving Han shocked by the person's condition. Dmitri urges Han to consider how challenging their training will be based on what they have witnessed. Puzzled, Han asks if the people on higher levels are not of the same age. Noting that the injured person appears to be an adult instructor, Dmitri reveals that those who reach level 2 receive medication to accelerate their physical growth, to prepare for battling dragons, as the association won't wait for them to fully mature. Instead of being shocked, Han finds this concept intriguing, making Dmitri surprised. Han states that he always wanted to become an adult since he had to do all sorts of things to survive, including street thefts. As a result of doing those things, he had to fight against the attackers who tortured him brutally and always overpowered him because of their huge figures. Remembering whatever he has faced, Han states that he does not want a happy childhood, and that the only thing that matters to him is survival. Hearing that, Dmitri remarks that he has the strongest mentality in Ark. In response, Han lowers his head, suggesting that they should go back. The next day, John informs them that they will begin airborne training, instructing them to apply what they have learned. While wearing their training suits, Dmitri remarks to Han that undergoing such rigorous training right after leaving the hospital makes him remember the hospital beds. In response, Han smiles and looks at the huge bag, which is part of their suit, stating that it seems to have a lot of food inside. Considering such a large number of belongings, Han states that the training does not seem to be simple airborne training. Looking at some of the students who have already opened their rations and are eating, Dmitri becomes annoyed. Suddenly noticing someone, Dmitri calls out to Han, telling him to look at this student standing beside them. Hearing that, Han looks at Del, wearing his suit, while Dmitri remarks that he is the last remaining genius from England and states that he really wants to fight the boy. Hearing their murmurs, Del turns to them, finding Dmitri staring at him with a cold expression on his face. Meanwhile, Han looks at Kiro sitting at a distance, looking at his ration bag, and wonders what the purpose of that might be. Just then, John calls out to them, telling them to quickly get on board. Wearing their helmets, all of them quickly get up and run towards the helicopter in front of them. After they all get inside, the helicopter starts to move away, and John turns to the other instructors, stating that they should also proceed. Remembering Han is always being the one who came to help and fight for him, Kuro hangs from the tree with his parachute stuck in the branches and cries desperately. Having been stuck for a considerable amount of time, he believes that Han may not come to save him this time. 1 hour earlier, while the helicopters were moving above the ocean, the children sat with anxiety and looked outside, wondering how far they would be taken. Just then, John connected to their wristwatches and informed them that they were currently above a deserted island, where they would descend and begin survival training. John explained the island for that they would find 2 days' worth of rations inside their bags and would have to survive on the deserted 2 days. Upon hearing this, all the children were shocked by this sudden announcement of survival training out of the blue. While they all felt scared, Dmitri reassured them that it would be fun like camping. Just then, John informed them that their instructors would be coming to the island within 1 week and they would have to survive until then, causing further anxiety among them. After some time, John and the other instructors reached the island and rescued the children who had fallen into the ocean after jumping out of the helicopters. After pulling out one of the children, John turned to the other instructor and asked if he was the last of them. In response, the instructor confirmed that there were no other children who had fallen out, and he informed John that some children had already formed groups of 7. John remarked that just because they were children, it didn't mean they were innocent, and they were just like adults. According to John, these children would value strength as soon as they felt out of control, and instead of starving together, they would start stealing each other's rations. Meanwhile, inside the island, one of the children stood holding a stick, having knocked out one of his peers just to steal his ration. Opening the child's ration bag, they noticed that he hadn't even touched the food and began taking it out. While another child instructed them to save some for the leader, just then Carl, one of the children acting as their leader, turned to them, stating that he had instructed them to gather as much as possible before sunset, but not to share the food with others. Instead, he suggested that by grouping up and stealing like that, no one would be able to oppose them. All of them agreed, becoming excited to challenge Dimitri and Han, believing that with their collaboration, they could even face Del Simon. Carl then heard a voice calling for help and turned around, asking if his team members had also heard it. Taking their belongings, they started to move in the direction of the voice, considering this person their next target. Meanwhile, Han, who had fallen into the ocean, walked out of the water, completely soaked, realizing that falling into the ocean had wasted a lot of his time. As he looked at the island, he realized it was very open, and he needed to find a sheltered place. While walking, he thought that for children who had never experienced starvation, the ration meant to last for only 2 days would be insufficient. He knew that when desperate from hunger, they might try to steal food from others, and he wondered if children like Del Simon had ever experienced hunger. Meanwhile, Del, who was also walking on the island, suddenly came face to face with Dimitri and asked why he was following him. In response, Dimitri challenged him to a fight, but Del simply turned around and started walking, stating that he didn't want to waste his strength. Hearing that, Dimitri tried to stop him, explaining that he didn't mean any harm and only wanted to spar, which left Del surprised and wondering if Dimitri was insane. Thinking that it might have been too soon to ask, Dimitri suggested that they should become friends first and then spar, but Del found him annoying and walked away. Meanwhile, Carl and his group tracked the sound and finally reached the tree where Kiro was hanging, asking for help. Carl commented that hanging from the tree suited Kiro, took his ration back, and walked away with his group without helping him down. Watching them leave, Kiro requested that they at least lower him down if they wanted the bag, but Carl told him to be thankful for being spared and to wait to be rescued by the instructors. They laughed and walked, leaving Kiro to cry, thinking they were cruel. As day turns into night, Kiro continues to hang from the tree, crying continuously, and thinking about his classmates, mocking him for shedding tears over trivial matters. He lets out a loud scream, overcome by hunger and desperation, with his vision blurred from starvation. He suddenly begins to see a shadow resembling Han approaching him, which surprises him before he loses consciousness. However, the shadow turns out to be his imagination and disappears right after he loses consciousness. The next morning, while he is still hanging from the tree unconscious, Han arrives at the scene for real and watches him, becoming shocked. After some time, Han sits outside a camp he made, holding a stick. When Kiro suddenly emerges from the camp, surprised to see him, Han turns to him and smiles, asking if he is awake. While Kiro stares at him with astonishment, giving half of his food to Kiro, Han tells him to have it, stating that it is his breakfast. Han mentions that he didn't get a chance to recover his backpack, so they should just share the food he has. Thinking that the quantity of food is very little to feed one person, Kiro is about to say that he doesn't want to become a burden to him. However, because he's starving, he is unable to refuse the food and starts to eat, thanking Han for the favor while crying desperately. In response, Han tells him to finish the food so that they can go out and find water. Meanwhile, certain surveillance cameras roam around throughout the island, capturing footage of all the children busy exploring the area. While John sits in his room, watching the footage, Octo comes to him, asking if he found someone interesting. In response, John states that there is a child who has gone crazy and points to the footage, telling him to look. Meanwhile, one of the children remarks that a week on a deserted island is ludicrous and that they just have to survive somehow. Therefore, he makes a raft and goes to the ocean in order to return to Ark. Meanwhile, Han and Kiro reach the ocean and look into the water, wondering if it will be drinkable. To check it, Han takes some of the water in a bottle and drinks it, declaring it drinkable, and tells Kiro to drink as much as he can and take some with him. After taking the water, they hurry back to shelter, remarking that it is hard to travel during the day because of the intense heat. While walking, Han thinks that they will need more food if they have to spend the entire week with just the two of them. However, looking around, he doesn't seem to find anything edible and wonders if this is the reason the others are stealing food. When Kiro suddenly notices something, becoming surprised, while Han is about to walk away, Kiro suddenly stops him. That it is a trap, causing him to step on a twig, revealing a large hole in the ground. Astonished by Kiro's ability to find out the trap, Han turns to him, asking how he found it out. While Kiro hesitates in responding, Han asks if he saw the trap, and he agrees, while feeling a little shy and nervous. As Kiro goes on to explain what type of trap it was, Han realizes that Kiro's unique ability has activated, which is something like short-term foresight, a very superior and rare ability. Walking away, Han wonders if the extreme conditions on the island worked as a stimulant for Kiro and considers this training to be a fantastic opportunity for him to prove his abilities. Meanwhile, Carl and his group members reach Han's camp. Looking inside, they find 2 plates of breakfast, realizing that there are 2 people who have taken their belongings with them, leaving nothing behind. As Carl turns around after having a look inside the camp, one of his group members asks if they should destroy the place. However, he disagrees, stating that those living in the camp have not permanently left it and will come back soon. Therefore, he decides that they will come back later and attack them while they are resting. After some time, Kiro and Han return to the camp, with Kiro feeling utterly exhausted and wanting to rest as they are about to enter the camp. Han notices something and tells Kiro to stop, revealing that someone came in their absence. He explains that the stone he left is an indicator above the camp is now lying on the ground, along with the footprints of multiple people near the tent, in case they are a group of people. Han states that they will definitely return to steal from them and suggests taking the parachute trap and moving on. Therefore, despite being tired, they open up their tent and start to move away. Looking at the surroundings getting darker, Han states that they need to find a suitable place to stay before it gets any darker. Turning to Kiro, he asks if there is anything he can see, but Kiro replies that something seems strange and he feels like his eyes are closing. Confused, Han calls out to him, but Kiro moves into a state of trance and starts viewing a gigantic leopard in front of them, fighting with Han. Realizing what is about to happen, Kiro opens his eyes and forcefully pushes Han away, causing him to crash to the ground, when a leopard suddenly jumps on the spot where Han was standing. Looking at the leopard, Han becomes shocked and looks at his stick lying at a distance, realizing that there is no way he can fight against the beast barehanded. Just then, the leopard opens its mouth to attack him, and Han closes his eyes, anticipating the deadly strike. However, before it can do that, a strong wave of energy strikes the leopard, causing it to fall at a distance. Surprised, Han turns around to find Joyce, one of his classmates, asking if he is all right. Looking at Joyce, Han becomes surprised when Joyce comes to them and asks if Kiro is also accompanying him. Han, looking at his injured leg, asks what happened, and Joyce reveals that he was caught in a trap set up by someone and can barely stand up. Crashing to the ground because of his injured leg, he states that he is glad he found them. Hearing about the trap, Kiro turns to Han, reminding him that they also came across one earlier. And Han agrees, stating that both of those were probably set up by the same people. Realizing that there is a group of students who are stealing the ration bags, Joyce states that he does not have any such belongings in the first place. Hearing that, Han becomes surprised and asks where his ration bags went, and Joyce reveals that when his leg got injured, he ate all of them to avoid anyone stealing it from him. Remarking that he's stupid, Han states that they should try to find a shelter first. As the night grows darker, Carl sits in another part of the forest, with all of his group members asleep. He remembers that one day his father told him about the sensors reacting when he passed under them, stating that he seems to have a psychic ability. Considering it a good opportunity, his father told him to join ARC, but he argued that he was in the middle of shooting a movie. Annoyed by his response, his father explained that if he manages to become a psyker, he will not have to pursue his acting career anymore and will be able to obtain fame and riches. His father explained that when the war would be over, the psykers would become warriors of the nation, and because of being superhuman, he could rule over everyone. In this way, his father finally convinced him to join ARC, and he came to the place despite feeling annoyed at his father's intervention in his career. The morning, Dmitri is busy doing calisthenics exercises while Del watches him from behind. Looking at him exerting a lot of stamina, Del asks if he has this much energy to spare and states that they do not have much left to eat, asking how he will last for the remaining 5 days. In response, Dmitri states that he is a physical type and needs to train in order to become an elite striker, causing Del to remark that psykers need their abilities to fight and not strength. Hearing that, Dmitri remembers Han stating that he was the only one with the ability to take him on in armed combat. In response, Del becomes surprised and asks if he has fought with Han before, and Dmitri smiles, thinking that he has taken the bait because of Han and might get ready to spar. Meanwhile, in a cave hidden between the trees, Han wakes Kiro and Joyce up, stating that they should stay together for the remainder of the training period, stating that he and Kiro will go and bring some food and firewood. Han tells Joyce to stay back and guard their shelter, and he complies. Appreciating his combustion ability, Han thanks Joyce for his help, stating that it is because of him that they have an advantage in survival training. Reaching the ocean, Han looks at the fish swimming in water, and states that having fire can give them the privilege to enjoy foods like that. Hearing that, Kiro asks if he knows how to fish, stating that they do not even have any equipment for that. In response, Han looks at him and smiles, thanking him and making him confused. Han explains that this thanks is for saving him when he was in danger the previous day and finding them a safe cave to stay in. Han states that he thought helping him would be the best course of action, but found out that it could not like that and could not find a solution. However, he states that after landing on the island he has come to realize Kiro is indeed a genius psychic. Han tells Kiro that he possesses the strength to defend himself and save his friends, and by depending on each other, they are going to last through this because they are friends. These words make Kiro remember the time when he was just a nameless child in an orphanage in Japan and was given the name Kiro just because of his dark skin. Remembering the time when everyone used to criticize him for his nature and appearance, Kiro becomes overwhelmed, realizing that he has finally found a friend who believes in him. Meanwhile, Han explains to him the strategy of how they are going to catch the fish, and Kiro bends down towards the water, activating his ability of short-term foresight. After successfully finding the location of the fish underwater, Kiro uses telekinesis to bring the fish out of the water, repeating the process again and again. They are able to catch a lot of fish, which is sufficient to fulfill their needs. On the 3rd day of training, Han and Kiro are able to catch 8 fish because of Kiro's ability and happily walk towards the cave. Thinking that Joyce will be very happy to see them, as they reach the cave, they start to feel scorching hot rays coming in their direction. Realizing something, Han tells Kiro to stay there and quickly moves toward the cave. Finding the cloth covering the cave to be burned, wondering what might have happened, Han enters the cave and finds Joyce lying unconscious on the ground. Throwing a wooden sword in Del's direction, Dmitri tells him to catch it. Catching the sword, Del becomes surprised and asks why he packed up his weapons even for the airborne training. Dmitri, stating that he was thinking of fighting with 2 swords instead of 1, asks why Del agreed to spar with him. In response, Del states that if he really fought with Han on fair terms, it must be Dmitri who is going to be promoted to Class A, and he wants to check if he is capable or not. Hearing that, Dmitri smiles, stating that he likes Del's attitude. With that, they charge at each other and start the battle. While Del leans downward, Dmitri leaps up to launch an attack, feeling a little anxious because of Del's ability. As both of them reach near each other, Del brings his sword straight to Dmitri's chest and hits it, leaving him surprised. Dmitri quickly retaliates, swinging his sword swiftly, causing Del to drift backward. Thinking it's in his favor, Dmitri runs towards Del and starts the battle once again, launching countless strikes, some of which hit Del and cause him a little pain. However, after managing to block most of the strikes, Del reveals his true ability and attacks him with very quick speed, leaving Dmitri utterly bewildered. Barely managing to block the attacks, Dmitri considers it better to maintain a distance and tries to do so when Del launches another close-range attack. In order to save himself, Dmitri quickly leans backward and, while lying on the ground, swiftly swings his sword, causing Del to drop his weapon. Quickly regaining his balance, Dmitri stands up, stating that the battle will now be over, and charges at Del to launch an attack. However, As soon as he reaches him, Del uses telekinesis to assist in bringing his sword towards him, hitting Dimitri's head and causing him to crash to the ground. Stating that it would have been his victory if it were armed combat, Del reminds him that they are psykers. And for them, their abilities are more important than physicality. However, he still becomes surprised by the results of the battle, wondering if Han is even stronger than Dimitri. Meanwhile, Han lifts Joyce up, telling him to open his eyes. To this, Joyce speaks up, assuring him that he is fine. Lighting up the fire, they helped Joyce lean against the wall in a comfortable position and ask who did that to him. In response, Joyce reveals that it was Carl and his gang comprised of 7 members who took away all of their food, stating that they will come back to the cave again. Joyce suggests quickly moving their shelter to some other place. Stating that he will not let the people who pick on his friends go away so easily, Han says that they should temporarily look for some other shelter. In order to seek revenge, Han shares his plan to ambush them when the sun goes down. At night, Han and Kiro sit outside the cave, looking at the children guarding the place and find out that Carl and his group have taken the cave as their shelter as they expected. Turning to Kiro, Han states that they will begin when he is ready, and Kiro agrees. Han says that it would not be possible for him alone, but if Kiro is with him, they can definitely take down all those children. Thinking that Han is the only person who believes in him, Kiro vows to never disappoint him no matter what and activates his telekinesis ability. Lifting a stone from the ground and lifting multiple stones in this manner, Kiro throws them in the direction of the cave, causing them to hit the children standing outside, and making them bewildered. Hearing the voices of his group members, Carl becomes confused and starts to move out of the cave. Meanwhile, the children standing outside locate the place where the stones are coming from and start running in its direction while dodging the stones. Being able to clearly see their path, Kiro starts to hit them with more and more stones, making them confused. While they are busy saving themselves from the stones, Han comes out, finally holding a stick and starts to hit them one by one, causing all of them to crash to the ground. When Carl comes out, surprised to see Han, Carl keeps standing still while Han points his stick towards him, ready to seek revenge. Looking at Han, Carl is astonished by the fact that he took down 6 of his group members on his own, considering it unbelievable. He states that he can't be alone and asks about the identity of the second group member. In response, Han calls out to Kiro, stating that he can come out since dealing with Carl is something he can do on his own. Realizing that they are beaten by 2 losers, one of whom is Kiro, Carl becomes frustrated. Meanwhile, Han declares that they have come to avenge Joyce and states that this is a real fight in which he will not go easy on him. Stating that he can't tolerate this any longer, Carl picks up a stick from the ground, vowing to crush Han, stating that he can try if he wants. Han also grabs his stick tightly, rushing forward. Carl leaps up, attempting to launch an attack while Han keeps standing still, holding his stick. However, as soon as Carl reaches near him, he slightly moves his stick, causing it to hit Carl's face and crash him to the ground. Annoyed by the sudden retaliation, Carl attempts to hit him once again, which Han effortlessly dodges and hits Carl's stomach with his stick, causing him intense pain. Asking if it is painful, Han tells him to brace himself, stating that it is only the beginning. Overwhelmed with anger, Carl quickly turns to him, telling him to stop showing off and tries to launch another attack, yet receives the same kind of retaliation. After being hit multiple times, Carl finally drops his stick and crashes to the ground, feeling immense pain. Realizing that he has been defeated, Carl considers it impossible, wondering how strong Han is. Meanwhile, Han speaks up, stating that Joyce is already very injured and asking if it is necessary to go that far and torture him more. Meanwhile, Carl grabs some sand in his hand from the ground, telling Han not to look down on him. He remembers that he was considered a genius and a famous actor in Germany, and his father took advantage of his fame for political gain and obtained many things in the process. However, there was no end to his greed, and he wanted him to become a psyker even if he needed to drag others down for that. Stating that he did not come all the way up here just to be stopped by a person like him, Carl throws the sand in Han's eyes, causing his vision to get blurry. Taking advantage of the situation, he launches a forceful punch at Han's face, causing him to go flying backward. Watching that, Kiro becomes shocked and runs towards him when Carl gives him a threatening gaze, telling him not to come any closer. Scared by his gaze, Kiro stops on his way and watches Carl hit Han badly, causing him to crash to the ground once again and lose consciousness. Getting up, Carl holds his stick, stating that he will never let anyone climb over him again, and is about to hit Han with it when a stone comes flying and hits his face. Enraged, he turns around, finding Kiro using telekinesis, while telling him to get away from Han. Carl asks if Kiro is also trying to climb over him. Carl goes near him and grabs him from his clothes, stating that he never liked him from the beginning, and a useless person like him should have been kicked out from the beginning. Carl is about to hit him when Han gets up. Punching his face, Han causes him to crash to the ground and asks if he considers himself useful, highlighting that he only believes in numbers and hides behind his group members. Han states that all the people, including Del Simon, Dimitri, Joyce, and Kiro, are better than him, and that in order to climb up, he will have to eliminate all of them. This causes Carl to become a little anxious and frightened. Stating that he is nothing, Han brings the sharp end of his stick down beside him and pierces it into the ground, sparing him while he keeps lying on the ground. Han states that everyone has a reason to climb up and he needs to find another way for that, warning him against harming his friends again. Sometime later, Carl starts to talk to himself, stating that he never wanted to become a psyker in the first place and starts to laugh. After returning to Joyce, all three of them spend the rest of their days on the deserted island with enjoyment. When finally the rescue helicopters arrive, looking at the helicopters, Joyce states that he never wants to have this experience again, and Han laughs. All the other children who are gathered in one place call out to Han, Kiro, and Joyce, thanking them for providing them with food. They really appreciate the abilities of Kiro and Joyce to catch and cook the fish, which causes them to become a little shy. Pointing towards Han, Joyce states that the person they should be thanking is him because all of that is his idea. Just then, they receive a message on their wristwatches, notifying them that their survival training has ended and appreciating their efforts. Reading the message, Del and Dimitri also become relieved, thinking that it is the first time they have felt glad to hear the voice of their instructor. Just then, John informs them that they will board the helicopters when they are called, making Han confused about what it means. A few moments later, the helicopters start to land on the island, and board the students on the basis of a roll call. John takes Han, Kiro, Del, and Dimitri in his own helicopter and informs them that their training was fully monitored, and because of the anonymous vote, only 4 of them have been chosen. He informs them that it is not ordinary training but a test to find out which of them are the diamonds in the rough that would become the guardians of humanity. Calling out to all 4 of them, John informs them that they have been nominated as candidates for advancement to level 2. After getting back at ARC, all the first-year students are given a holiday. Joyce comes to Han, who is busy reading a book, and asks if he would like to play soccer. Looking at his expression, Joyce asks if he even knows how to play soccer, and he agrees, closing the book and getting up from the bed. After some time, all of the students gather on the football field and form a team to begin the match, with Dimitri instructing Del to avoid using psychic abilities during the game. Knowing that ARC only provides a holiday when there is a matter of great importance, the children look at their instructors sitting in a meeting room, busy discussing something. Meanwhile, inside the meeting room, the instructors discussed the matter of advancement evaluation for level 2, under the chairmanship of ARC Chief of Staff Alexander. Looking at the documents, Sasha Grace, one of the researchers, states that there are 4 students going to be promoted this time and asks what is so special about them. Reading their details, Alexander first talks about Del Simon and Dimitri, stating that they do not seem to lack anything and are very capable. Reading about Han, he comes to find out that his psychic ability has been the lowest since enrollment and that he was promoted from Class D just because of John's request. Wondering why a kid like that could advance, Alexander turns to John, telling him to explain his reasons. In response, Wei Chen reminds him of Han's fight with John, explaining that he has outstanding weapon handling ability, patience, and mentality, everything that a soldier requires. Hearing that, Alexander remarks that it is quite unusual for him to praise someone like that. Taking the discussion forward, John states that, aside from Han's psychic potential, his telekinesis control is very refined, and he can use it to strengthen his weapon-wielding skill. Above everything else, he highlights the fact that Han learned all of these by himself, without being taught, while Han keeps scoring goals against the opposite team on the ground. Hearing all these claims, Alexander becomes silent and moves on to Kiro. Meanwhile on the ground, Joyce praises Han for his expertise in playing the game, stating that he does not seem like he has never learned to play the game. Meanwhile, Dimitri and Del start to argue among themselves about losing the game to Han. While the advancement of Kiro to level 2 is being discussed, Sasha becomes annoyed upon discovering that Kiro is nominated despite being a psychologically sensitive child. Stating that the most vital thing among their standards is mentality, Sasha states that he will die if he undergoes the physical transformation process and faces grave dangers. In response, John smiles, revealing that Kiro's psychic advancement is by far the greatest, and he is even far past the rest of the three. However, despite his merits, Alexander considers his mentality to be the biggest problem. However, John explains that this is the reason why Han needs to advance with him since his mentality is greatly influenced by Han. Stating that Han is currently playing the role of his older brother, John causes Alexander to feel confused, remarking that both John and Wei Chen seem to be eager to advance Han. Meanwhile, on the football field, Han and Joyce collaborate to take the ball to the court once again, stealing it from all the other members of the opposite group. Reaching near the court, Joyce finds both Del and Dimitri standing there to snatch the ball from them while they are trying to stop Joyce from scoring a goal. He quickly passes the ball to Han, who kicks it towards the court, winning the game and astonishing the members of the opposite team. Celebrating their success, Han states that both of them make a great team. When someone calls out to them telling them to stop playing, turning around, they find John, who informs them about an announcement about the results that is going to be made soon but states that he will tell them the result beforehand. He reveals that all 4 of the candidates have been confirmed for advancement, leaving them surprised. Coming to Han, Joyce puts his hand on his shoulder, asking why he is making such an expression and congratulating him for his advancement. Smiling and excited, Joyce tells him to make sure to save a good spot for him, and Han smiles, hoping to meet again in the future while they are shaking hands in agreement. John comes to them, telling them to return to their dorms and instructing the advancing candidates to pack up and stand by as the students start to leave. Han turns to John, thanking him and stating that his advancement evaluation and the opportunity to become a class representative were all because of him. In response, John states that he will not be able to give up after this, and Han assures him that he is not the one to back off. Smiling, he wishes the best of luck to Han, telling him to make and survive, and Han salutes him in response while he walks away. After some time, all 4 of them pack up their things and come out of the dorms with Dimitri, feeling super excited for what they are going to experience. While Han confirms the meeting place to be a medical ward, Kiro starts to tremble with fear and anxiety. Holding Kiro's shoulder, Han tells him not to worry, stating that they will be together. But Kiro expresses how scared he is because of the treatment they're going to be receiving. Stating that there is nothing to be scared of, Dimitri urges them to proceed towards the ward, remarking that this treatment can make them much stronger than they are now. At the moment, as they reach the ward, they are welcomed by Sasha, who tells them that she will be taking care of them for the next 5 weeks. Hearing that, Han's surprised and asks why it is going to take so long. She explains that they will spend 2 weeks in incubation and will receive rehabilitation training for the next 3 weeks. Realizing that they will have to spend 2 whole weeks inside the incubation machine, Kiro, Del, and Dimitri become shocked. Turning to them, Han states that he will see them after 2 weeks and encourages them all, causing them to join hands. Watching that, Sasha smiles, realizing that the reason Han was so highly recommended by John was this encouraging aspect of his personality. After placing them all into incubation machines, Sasha instructs her colleagues to fill the container with culture fluid. Causing them all to feel suffocated and disgusted, she looks at them feeling uneasy, and states that it is claustrophobia that every child experiences at this stage, telling them to endure it and stating that they will fall asleep soon. After spending 1 week inside the incubation machine, Sasha comes to examine them, thinking that the coming week is going to be critical for them. As she watches them, she wonders human species must go this far to be worthy of survival. While she holds her head, her colleague approaches her stating that she seems tired and should go to rest. Coming out of the room, she goes to her office, and finds John sitting there and remarks that he claims not to be interested in these children, yet comes to the ward every day. In response, John, busy smoking a cigarette, states that it is because he wants to make sure she does not damage his assets or kill them. Causing her to feel annoyed, she reveals that there has been no problem so far, and they are currently in the middle of inserting the second culture fluid. She further explains that the second culture fluid consists of a dragon's psychic core and contains a highly concentrated liquid that has diluted parts of a dragon's heart, thinking that resonating with the dragon's core can enable them to use their psychic abilities more naturally. John expects Han to raise his level of psychic abilities through that. While he is thinking about that, Sasha's wristwatch suddenly starts to ring, and she runs towards the incubation room in a hurry. Opening the door, she asks what the matter is, and finds Han moving inside the incubation machine, informing her that Han has regained consciousness. Sasha's colleague states that he is going to feel an excruciating amount of pain. Worried for his well-being, Sasha quickly goes forward, stating that they need to stop it and is about to pull the lever, when John stops her, stating that she cannot do it. Shocked by that, Sasha asked how he can stop her from doing that, and he explains that Han needs to advance to the next level no matter what. 1 week later, Han, now resembling an adult, sits in Sasha's office while she inquires about how he has been, and he states that he is fine, stating that there has never been a case similar to his in the past. Sasha reveals that it was the first time a psyker showed resistance to psychic abilities. She remembers the time when she wanted to save Han by stopping the process, but John forbade her, stating that Han did not reach this point by being recognized for his psychic abilities. He told her to continue the process without resonance, stating that Han is the type of child who can endure anything no matter what. Remembering that, she asked if he feels uncomfortable in any way, and Han states that he feels quite refreshed and will not have to worry about being kicked out for his low grade after that. Hearing that Sasha acknowledges his incredible mentality, thinking that he is the soldier John always recommended for having the strongest mentality. Wondering why his psychic abilities are so low despite having such a strong mentality, she tells him to leave and he gets up. After leaving the office, he meets his other fellows and is warmly greeted by Dimitri, who states that they are going to be at level 2 from that day on, while Del stands at a distance with the same cold gaze. Han remarks that 5 weeks have passed in the blink of an eye, and everyone has changed a lot. Looking at Kiro, Han remarks that he seems to have changed the most, and expresses his relief at everyone's survival, stating that there is nothing strange about it. Del starts to walk away, telling him not to act like he is their leader, while the rest of the three keep talking. After leaving the ward, they'd reach the building for level 2 psykers, where they get their own separate room to stay. Among the 12 squads comprising the level 2 psykers, Han and Kiro are assigned to squad 7. Going to meet their squad, they are greeted by Kato Soki, the leader of squad 7, who explains to them the 3 core trainings in level 2, with one of them being a firearm. He asks if they are aware of the reason they practice firearm shooting, and stating that modern arms are still effective against minions, Han agreeing to that. Katasoki explains that the minions they know about include low intelligence beings like ogres, grunts and werewolves. However, there are high intelligence beings like Elo, as well, who serve as mid-level commanders and possess psychic abilities as well. Hearing that, Han inquires if it does not mean that physical weapons will not work against them, and Soki agrees, stating that they can easily ward off physical weapons. However, unlike the dragons, they possess a very limited amount of psychic energy, which once exhausted makes them ordinary targets like the other monsters. After that, he moves to the airborne training and mock battles, stating that they are also equally important methods and that they are a competitive method of fighting against the other squads. He explains that mock battles are held in artificial forests, in which the main event is to capture the flag, which means to steal the flag of the opponent at their base. He considers that to be very difficult training, in which there is a high chance of getting fatal injuries because of the sharp weapons. The third type of training, called airborne training, is done through air bits, and is simple enough that they only need to make the opponent fall. However, it needs a strong supporter at the back who can manipulate the air bits to help their squad members travel and attack when needed. Stating that they did not previously have any psykers to support them from behind, Soki remarks that this problem has been solved after the arrival of Kiro. Looking at Kiro, Soki asks if he will be able to manage them properly, causing Kiro to hesitate while replying. Looking at his hesitation, the vice team leader tells him to reply properly, stating that they are not asking for his opinion and that if his squad wants him to fulfill a role, he must do it. In response, Han states that Kiro can definitely do it but is not the type of person to perform well under pressure. In response, the vice team leader becomes angry, remarking that he does not know anything. However, Soki stops him from overreacting, stating that Han definitely has a point and they still have a lot to learn from their experiences. Turning to Han, Soki states that despite being on the same level, all of the other members of the squad are his seniors and far more experienced than him, telling him to be respectful. He further states that Han came to their squad just because he wanted Kiro on their team, stating that both of them are a package deal like a bonus, stating that he does not expect much from ranking psychic like Han. Soki instructs him to avoid getting in their way, causing all of the squad members to laugh. Despite being enraged by their attitude, Han adopts a respectful tone, stating that he will make sure not to get in their way, and shakes hands with him, while Soki considers him an arrogant individual, wondering how long he is going to last, while Han vows to show him how capable he is. Returning to his room, Han freshens up and goes for training, displaying expertise in shooting, which causes Soki to become silently disappointed at not finding anything to blame him for after practicing shooting while lying down. Han starts to run toward the target, firing bullets accurately and hitting all of them. Considering his collaboration to be good, Han thinks that this will not give Soki any chance to call him a nuisance to the squad. Just then he looks at Soki, who stands with a frustrated expression on his face, and calls out to Kiro, asking what he is doing by standing still. In response, Kiro becomes a little confused, causing him to hold his head in disappointment. While taking a shower after training, Han wonders if his performance was not good enough for him to be accepted on the team. The next day, when he goes for practice, Soki informs him that he is on standby. Soki explains that in the mock battle training, the squad with more members has to adjust their team members accordingly, and they already have too many squad members with the same abilities as him. Soki states that instead of fighting in the battle, he can simply observe the battle from the training hall. Despite being disappointed at this partiality, Han remembers his younger siblings who are being taken care of by Major Kong and accepts it. After that, all of them gather in the training center to watch the flag capturing battle between Squad 3 and Squad 9. Soki suggests watching their battle carefully and analyzing their strategies since there are some new members in Squad 3. Hearing about a new face in Squad 3, Han realizes they are talking about Del Simon, and all of them watched Del on the screen with interest. The squad members remark that he seems to be a rude individual but also a psychic genius. Meanwhile, in the artificial forest, the members of Team 9 stand facing those of Team 3 with their weapons, wondering if they are insane to have come directly in front of them like that. In response, the leader of Team 3 states that they have an unbeatable psyker, which will make it easy for them to defeat Team 9 and take their flag. With that, Del activates his telekinesis, and the members of Team 9 charge at him to defeat him before he can use his ability. However, before they can reach him, all of their weapons disappear, leaving them shocked and confused. Looking at Del, they find him wielding extraordinary powers, causing their weapons to float in the air, and they wonder how he did that. Just as Del causes their weapons to come toward them at great speed and slashes their bodies, the rest of his team members charge forward to take the flag, overpowering the members of Team 9. Del's team easily takes the flag away, leaving the other squads astonished. Understanding the importance of having a great psyker during a mock battle, Soki turns to Kiro, stating that they can also follow the strategy since they have him on their team. However, at this moment, Han calls out to him, stating that he has a different idea. He explains that Squad 9 did not use any particular strategy and only pressed forward based on their individual capabilities. Stating this, he is about to say something else but hesitates, while Soki tells him to go on, asking if he wants to say that he would have proposed a different strategy if he were the leader. Looking at his rude expressions, Han realizes why Soki hates him so much. When another member of the squad signals him to come with him, taking him to a corner, the person states that both he and Soki acknowledge the fact that he is outstanding but he does not fit into their squad, upon which all the members agree. Realizing that they have been observing him, Han asks why he does not fit into their squad. In response, the person explains that this is because he is not afraid of voicing an opinion that contradicts Soki, acknowledging that he sometimes makes better decisions. The person states that there should only be one captain, since having even a little doubt about Soki can lead them to be divided. He reveals that as long as Soki is the leader, Han can never get a chance to participate in mock battles and advises him to submit a transfer request to another squad when the timing is right. This makes Han realize that all the squad members must have faith in their leader, and he is the person who has threatened the authority of Soki, causing all of them to hate him. Contemplating the transfer request for some time, he goes to Wei Chen's office the next day, giving him an application, which surprises Wei Chen. Reading the application, Chen inquires if Han really wants it, and Han agrees. Chen states that this matter needs to be discussed by all the level 2 instructors, so it might take some time. Returning to his room, he thinks that Wei Chen has made it easy for him since he needed some time. He decides to dedicate the time of mock battles to training his own abilities and analyzing the strategies used in squad battles to formulate his own. While he is thinking about that, Kiro comes to his room, asking what he talked to the vice squad leader about, but he changes the topic, asking about the preparations for his airborne training. In response, Kiro reveals that he can maneuver up to 4 airbits with people on them, causing Han to become astonished, stating that he seems to be one of the highest performers at level 2. This causes Kiro to become a little more confident, while Han smiles, thinking that he will always be there to cheer him up. The next day, all of the squad members gather in the training hall once again, discussing that there is an amazing psyker on Squad 7 named Kiro. Meanwhile, the competition is about to begin, and all of the squad members stand ready in their positions, turning to Kiro. Soki states that it is all upon him, telling him to take good care of them, while Kiro stands confidently determined to try his best. A few moments later, it is announced that the battle between Squad 1 and Squad 7 is about to begin, causing everyone to look at the screen in excitement. Han recalls that the most significant thing in airborne training is the airbit, which is the type of robotic drone that acts as steps mid-air. A single person generally manipulates airbits either to travel or to use them as a weapon against their opponent. Considering that the most important position during the airborne battle is that of a supporter who manipulates multiple airbits simultaneously, Han thinks it's a suitable position for Kiro. Meanwhile, Soki signals his squad members to proceed forward, stating that if they follow the strategies, it's going to be a sure victory for them. With that, his squad members stand on the air bits and proceed forward, causing the captain of Squad 1 to signal his team members to move as well. Looking at the members of Team 1 moving forward together bit by bit, the vice leader of Squad 7 considers it to be according to their expectations. As soon as the members of Team 1 reach them, they split up their air bits and start moving in different directions. However, before they can move away, the vice team leader reaches near one of them and hits him with such force that he crashes to the ground. Following that, Soki himself hits another squad member, causing him to fall down, and smiles, thinking that everything is going according to their plan. Realizing that Squad 7 has eliminated 2 members of the opposite team right after starting, the people watching the fight become astonished, wondering if their team was always that strong. Han remembers Soki explaining his strategy and telling Kiro to take responsibility for his and the vice team leader's air bits. Soki instructed Kiro to use his foresight ability to see their moves ahead of time and then maneuver the air bits accordingly, causing Kiro to feel a little nervous. Hearing the strategy, the vice team leader turned to Soki, asking if he planned on eliminating the members of the opposite team based on their close combat ability, and he agreed. Remembering that, Han realizes that Soki's strategy is working quite well for the time being, while they confidently keep fighting. Operating the air bits, Kiro feels increasingly anxious, thinking that even a single mistake of his can lead everyone to lose. Just then, his foresight ability shows him the next move the opposite team is going to take that can cause some damage to their team member. The very next moment, leader of Squad 1 hits the member of Squad 7 with a stick, causing him to become a little injured but not fall. Astonished by their capability, the members of Team 1 wonder if they're always this strong and realize that there are only 2 members left on their team. Looking at the members of Team 7 standing confidently in front of them, the captain of Team 1 watches Kiro, thinking of going for him instead of his team. Therefore, deciding to go with their first plan, he signals the only remaining team member of his, nodding in response. The team member starts to move ahead, with the captain himself jumping upwards, causing Soki and his team to wonder if they are coming for face-to-face combat. However, to their surprise, the captain of Team 1 jumps above them and lands on the air bit behind them, while the other member of his team collides with Soki and his fellows, and the bulky member of his group pushes them downward. The captain of Team 1 swiftly travels in Kiro's direction, eliminating all the squad members. In his way, telling his squad members to avoid chasing the captain. Soki instructs them to come and help them, stating that the person holding them plans to take them down. Watching this strategy, all of the people in the hall, including Han, become shocked, thinking that they should have gone to save Kiro. Meanwhile, Kiro remembers Soki telling him that the air bits 4 and 8 will always be on standby behind him for emergency situations. Looking at the captain of Team 1 coming towards him, Kiro decides to utilize those air bits and starts to maneuver them. Just as the team leader raises his weapon in the air, Soki and the rest of the squad members successfully overpower the second member of their group, causing him to crash to the ground. After eliminating that person, they quickly turn towards the rear, finding Kiro lying unconscious on the ground while the team leader stands beside him, smiling. Just then, the air bits controlled by Kiro become dysfunctional, causing Soki and the vice team leader to crash to the ground. This causes all of the people standing in the training hall to make different remarks about the squads. They realize that Soki's strategy solely relied on Kiro's remarkable psychic ability. However, when he operated the air bits on standby to hit the team leader of Squad 1, both of the air bits collided with each other and got destroyed, making him more anxious. This is how a single mistake by Kiro led all their plans to be destroyed. With that, the victory of Team 1 is announced, and Han starts to walk out of the hall, thinking that he would never have left Kiro alone if he were the squad leader. Visiting Wei Chen's office, Han then inquires about the status of his application, and Wei Chen informs him that his team establishment application has been accepted. Stating that his leader of evaluation was outstanding, Wei Chen reveals that all of the instructors agreed to give him a chance. With that, he gives him a paper mentioning the conditions for forming a squad, stating that there must be at least 4 members in the squad and he can appoint the members from other squads. Reading this condition, Han thinks that following it will cause all the other squad leaders to start hating him and formulate strategies to avoid losing their core members. However, still determined to try it, Han leaves the office thinking that the 2 members he would want to have on his team are Joyce and Kiro. Yet because Joyce is not level 2 currently, he decides to try talking to Kiro first. However, just then, he remembers one more person who can come into his team, and goes to one of the rooms, knocking on the door. Opening the door, the person turns out to be Dmitri, greeting him warmly. After losing the airborne battle, Soki becomes disappointed that their ranks keep dropping because of Kiro. Agreeing, the vice captain states that they should have pushed harder to bring Del Simon to their team. Soki concurs, praising Del for his incredible combat and psychic abilities, capable of handling at least 3 opponents simultaneously. In contrast, Soki dismisses Kiro as incapable, believing his abilities to be lies. Unknown to them, Han secretly overhears their conversation. Soki admits that he has no one else to replace Kiro, which is the sole reason for keeping him on the team. When Han approaches Dmitri to share his plan for forming a new team, Dmitri is astonished and asks Han whom he plans on recruiting besides him. Han reveals his intention to convince Kiro to join his team, but Dmitri remarks that squad leaders won't let their members leave so easily. Hearing this, Han asks Dmitri for his answer, and Dmitri politely refuses, stating that he has to become the next squad leader for Squad 5, making it difficult for him to leave his current team. Hearing that, Han lowers his head, deciding not to convince him further, while Dmitri goes on to state that he would rather be his opponent since it is more fun. Hearing this, Han smiles, warning Dmitri not to complain when he defeats him in the competition. And Dmitri playfully threatens to break both of Han's arms in response. As Han leaves Dmitri's room and walks through the corridor, the other squad leaders watch him with disgust, jealous of him and his attempt to establish a new squad. Just then, Soki blocks his way, asking if this is how he is going to stab him in the back. Stating that he does not care about him leaving the squad and forming a new one, Soki declares that he will not let him take Kiro from their team. Having no authority to say anything, Kiro also turns his gaze aside, while Han explains that he will not be able to show his full potential under their guidance. In response, Soki states that Kiro will gradually improve and become a core member of their squad. However, Han argues that they cannot ask their opponent to wait if the war breaks out immediately and claims that he can draw out the maximum of Kiro's potential immediately, stating that a commander has to win with limited manpower and that they cannot change the results later, no matter who they blame. Han causes Soki to become enraged, grabbing him from his clothes. Soki states that no matter what he says, they are not going to let him take Kiro. In response, Han states that they are no one to decide, and it will all depend on Kiro's decision, causing Soki to turn around and angrily call out to Kiro, stating that in case Kiro decides to leave, Soki threatens to kill him, causing Kiro to become frightened, asking if he can really do it. Han states that he talks uselessly too much and that if he ever falls in water, his mouth will be the only thing to float. In response, Soki punches him forcefully, causing him to crash to the ground. Looking at him, Han states that he will let that one slide because it will be annoying to get dragged around over something like this. With that, he starts to walk, telling Kiro that he will be waiting for him. While all the captains confidently state that no one will leave their squad for a person who has not even proven himself, hearing their rude remarks, Kiro feels bad as well as confused. Meanwhile, Han thinks that he has suggested joining his squad to all the people who were on their team and wonders what his next move must be. While lost in thought, he accidentally collides with someone wearing a skeleton face and a hoodie and apologizes, but the person quickly moves away without responding. Looking at the person's dress, which looks very unusual and different from others, Han wonders if something like that is even allowed. Just then, he receives a notification telling all squad leaders to gather in front of the second building. After some time, all the squad leaders arrive to meet Sasha, who introduces them to the 6 newly advanced individuals, stating that they need to be assigned to a squad. She states that she is going to give the first choice to the new squad leader and calls Han, causing him to think of it as a good opportunity. Stepping forward, Han introduces himself, stating that his group is currently lacking members and giving all of them a choice to join whoever wants it. Hearing that, all the other squad leaders start to laugh. However, just then one of them volunteers to join Han's squad, causing him to look up in surprise and find it to be Joyce, which makes him happy. At night, Han tells Joyce everything about his squad, causing him to become a little disappointed, thinking that more people should have joined him. However, happy for his collaboration, Han thanks Joyce for showing his trust and support, stating that he always wanted to be on the same team as him. In response, Joyce states that the people who are not joining his squad are fools and if they come to know about his abilities, they will be lining up at his door. Getting up, Joyce states that they should try to recruit more people the next day, and prepares to leave when someone knocks at the door. Opening the door, Han is shocked to see Kiro with a bruised face and asks what happened to him. In response, Kiro reveals that he told Soki about his decision to leave the squad and all he could do was torture him a little. Astonished to hear that, Han remarks that Kiro has become quite confident and has changed a lot. Joyce remarks that they formed the same team as they did on the deserted island, making them an unbeatable trio. Just then, someone walks into the room and asks if he can also become a part of the team, causing them to turn around. In stating that everyone is talking about Han, the person states that their squad seems to be the most fun. While surprised, Han stands still, staring at him. Putting his hand on Han's shoulder, Joyce states that he knows the person since they were in the same class, and Han smiles, stating that he is the person their squad needs at the moment. Recognizing him as Knut Meyer, Han welcomes him into the squad. While Han shares his hopes to have a good experience, while Knut asking if his joining has made their squad official. Agreeing, Han states that they are an eyesore to the other squads, and if they are not careful, they might be disbanded, which will not be good for them. In response, all of them assure him that they are ready to face whatever comes in their way. Looking at them, Han thinks that his shoulders feel heavy with responsibility but also feels confident in his ability to do it. The next day, Han takes his squad members to meet the head instructor, who greets them warmly and introduces himself to them. Turning to the squad members, Grossman, the head instructor, calls out the names of all of them, becoming familiar with their faces. While calling out to Kiro, he looks at his bruised face and asks what happened to it. In response, Kiro smiles, stating that he slipped from the stairs, causing him to become a little surprised and then instructs him to be careful. Coming to the point, Grossman states that they will be allotted a grace period for the competitions starting that day that will last for 3 weeks. Stating that they will have to participate in the competition after the period, the instructor advises them to work hard and prepare well in advance. A few days later, Han gets ready for a competition along with his team, realizing that they should not take this lightly. The first competition that is decided for them belongs to the category of gun survival against Squad 9, which is one of the strongest squads with the most victories. While he is thinking about that, Canute takes off his helmet, remarking that it is stuffy, and asks if it is fine to not wear it until they do not get shot, forcefully making him wear the helmet. Han asks if he wants to die. Han instructs him not to take it off, stating that he is not permitted to do that under any circumstances, causing him to become a little scared. Wearing his own helmet, Han states that the strategy they will be using is called the moving bunker, a name he has made just then, telling them not to laugh. Confused by such a strange name, all 3 of the squad members stare at him. After a few moments, their competition begins, with the members of Squad 9 standing confidently, thinking of finishing the competition quickly. On the other hand, Han shows an equal level of confidence, stating that they will definitely win when the competition begins. While watching the competition from the training hall, all the other squads encourage Squad 9 to beat Han and his team in order to punish them for standing up against them. Standing among the crowd, Dmitri remarks that Han and his group have become quite popular. While Del thinks that there is no way they can win the gun survival game, meanwhile, the members of Squad 9 start to proceed but are unable to find Han and his group. Wondering if they are sticking to the starting point, thinking that this is all they can do against a powerful squad like them, the members of Squad 9 decide to reach the place when Canute, who is hiding behind a tree, remarks that they are very fast. Turning to his wristwatch, Canute informs his team members that the opponents are within 200 meters of their range, and he will be joining them shortly. Reading the message, Han is surprised, thinking that they have quickly started moving in their direction. In response, Joyce remarks that they are the type of people who will never allow them to rest but shares his relief at finishing all their preparations. Han thinks that Canute should already be aware of their situation and instead of trying hard to get to them, he should stay back and keep hiding. However, in contrast to that, Canute leaves his place and reveals himself to the opponents who strike a bullet at his leg, causing him to feel intense pain. Looking at them advancing toward him at great speed, Canute starts shooting blindly, thinking that this will help strike at least one of them. However, all 4 members of Squad 9 quickly take their places behind trees, saving themselves from the bullet strikes. After firing some bullets, Canute crashes to the ground again, wondering where the opponents went. When they suddenly opened fire once again, causing him to quickly drift aside and hide behind the tree, thinking of the original strategy to get back to his team, Canute realizes that he will only become a burden to them with his injured leg and considers it better to buy them some time. Watching Canute, members of Squad 9 wonder why he is the only one facing them when one of them states that the battle is going to end with a direct encounter anyway. After thinking about something, the captain of the squad turns to his team members, stating that he is going to go inside and instructing them to give him cover. Meanwhile, Han, Joyce, and Kiro stand ready for battle, having fully recovered their lost stamina, and decide to start immediately. Han, expressing gratitude for Newt's strategic sacrifice, remarks that he must be injured, choosing to buy them time instead of regrouping. Joyce acknowledges that their energy recovery is due to Canute, recalling his earlier lack of stamina due to using telekinesis and fire to cut a tree, asserting that it is time to prove themselves. Han commands his squad to advance, and they proceed while using the tree log as their shield. Observing this, everyone in the training hall is surprised by their strategy, with Dmitri and Del crediting Kiro for it. Meanwhile, Canute, still hidden behind the tree, opens fire again, wasting all his bullets. As he sits down to reload, the captain of Squad 9 reaches near him, remarking that he is indeed alone while they were suspecting it to be a trap. Seeing one of Han's squad members defeated, Dmitri comments that it is still a good tactic, assuming the log shield is their last defense. However, Del points out a weakness in the strategy, suggesting that Han must be aware of it. Meanwhile, Han and his group keep getting closer to Squad 9 members, who are unable to stop them. They realize that they selected their members based on shooting abilities, and none of them have strong psychic powers to blow the gigantic log away. Han recognizes this weakness and begins to exploit it, causing Squad 9 to take cover behind trees for protection. Their captain instructs them to prolong the battle, anticipating that their psyker will tire from using telekinesis, giving them an advantage. Hearing that, Han thinks that he is already aware of this weakness and is using this log only as a means to bring them close enough to the targets. As soon as they reach Squad 9, Joyce uses his combustion ability to set surrounding plants on fire, leaving the opponents bewildered in the smoke. Seeing the members of Squad 9 covered in smoke, the people in the training hall question the legitimacy of such tactics. After creating a smoke screen, Joyce informs Han that Squad 9 members won't be able to see their surroundings. With a smile, Han directs his teammates to deal with those emerging from the smoke and swiftly defeats 2 members of Squad 9 who are coughing in haste. Realizing that 2 of their team members have already been eliminated, the third one feels anxious while their captain tells him to calm down, stating that the opponents cannot see them either. However, to their surprise, bullets come flying in their direction, with Han emerging from the smoke and stating that they have eyes that can see everything. With that, they fired a few final bullets, causing their squad to win, leaving all the people standing in the training hall surprised. While Dimitri feels happy for them to have won, Del becomes frustrated as well as jealous. Meanwhile, Kiro and Joyce happily turn to Han, giving him a thumbs up on their victory, and he reciprocates the same. Watching Han on the screen from a distance, Grossman, the head instructor, becomes surprised to have figured out his true capability. In celebration of their victory against the powerful Squad 9 members, Han and his team enjoy a special meal, feeling more encouraged to proceed forward. Stating that it is time for them to hear a few words from their squad leader who led them to this victory, Joyce turns to Han, asking him to say something. In response, Han shares his gratitude with everyone, stating that their victory was only possible with everyone's collaboration. Adding to that, Kiro calls his plan incredible, which became the reason for their victory. Han states that luck also played a part in their victory since they already figured out that Squad 9 would send those members who are the best at shooting for this competition. However, Canute gives credit to Han, stating that it was only possible because of his ability to read his opponents and remarking that his decision to join Han's team was the right one. Just then, he begins to feel an intense pain in his stomach, causing Joyce to tell him to go and rest. However, he assures them that he is fine and will never miss a feast like that no matter what. Meanwhile, the head instructor sits in his office, watching the footage of the competition, while feeling surprised that Han's squad defeated Squad 9, whose victory was guaranteed. He's thinking that he must squash them before they become overconfident in their abilities. Grossman wonders who will be the best for this plan and considers Soki as an option. Considering that Soki's squad will try their best to defeat Han's squad, Grossman wonders what will happen if Squad 7 loses to them. However, dismissing that thought, he decides to make it impossible for them to lose. Meanwhile, Han lies on his bed, unable to sleep, and recalls the time when he could not sleep due to the fear of getting expelled, which he doesn't need to worry about anymore. Confident in the abilities of his squad members, he thinks that no matter how strong the opponent is, they must be able to beat them with collaboration. The next day, their squad is nominated for a captain's battle against Squad 1. Standing ready for the competition to start, the squad captain of Team 1 reminds his members about their strategy for targeting Joyce and Kiro, stating that both of them have incredible psychic abilities. The squad captain nominates another individual along with him to deal with them exclusively, stating that he does not know about the abilities of the other 2 members of Han's squad. The squad captain states that they will not mean much to them. Therefore, he turns to the bulky member of their group, giving him the task of targeting the rest. Watching the competition on the screen, Dimitri wonders how much hatred they have with the instructors to go against Squad 1 in a captain battle. After a competition against Squad 9, with the strongest member of Team 1 wearing a headscarf, it is announced that in the captain battle, the opposite team needs to take down the person wearing a headscarf to win. Considering the nomination of that bulky person to become the captain, all of the people standing in the training hall think their victory is guaranteed. Excited for the competition, Dimitri wonders how Han is going to deal with the situation, while Del tells him to keep quiet and watch. However, as soon as the squad members reach Han and his team, they are surprised to find Kiro as the captain. Thinking of it as being against their strategy, the members of Squad 1 become confused and are unable to find Han. Meanwhile, Kiro, who is increasingly feeling nervous and anxious, tries to calm himself down, and the other two members of their group assure him that they will protect him no matter what. Thinking that, they proceed quickly as planned while the captain of Squad 1 assures himself that the opponents will not be able to find the opening even if their members hide somewhere. Therefore, he commands his team members to charge forward, and they comply as they start. Proceeding forward at great speed, Han stands on a tree branch right above his team members, recalling that this is a competition in which they only have to take down the captain. Meanwhile, the squad members reach Joyce and Canute, attempting to launch an attack. While they also come into action, activating their abilities, stating that their unique abilities will not work, the squad members utilize their specialty of physical combat and try to overpower them. Watching the fight from above, Han looks at Kiro, who is waiting for his signal, and tells him to proceed with the plan while jumping down himself. Meanwhile, the nominated captain of Squad 1 comes forward and grabs both Joyce and Canute tightly, making them unable to move. Instructing him to keep grabbing them, the leader of the squad rushes towards Kiro in order to take him down. While Han reaches for them, declaring it to be their victory, the squad members charge at Kiro, who keeps looking upward, making them confused. Just then, something crashes to the ground, causing smoke to spread everywhere, leading them to turn around in bewilderment. As soon as the clouds of smoke dissipated, the members of the squad become shocked to find their captain lying on the ground with Han sitting next to him, declaring their victory. Watching that, all the people standing in the training hall all become surprised, while astonished at Han jumping down from a tree that is almost 5 stories tall. The entire hall begins to praise him, calling him an incredible individual. Watching their reaction, Dmitri laughs, stating that they were talking negative things about Han a while ago, and he has proven himself yet again through his ludicrous strategies. While all of the squad members get impressed by Han, wondering why he did not take part in competitions, Soki becomes enraged and frustrated. One day before their battle with Squad 1, Han and his team were practicing in the training hall, confident in their abilities and progress. Han noticed Kiro using telekinesis to control a living human, which he found incredible. In response, Kiro complimented Han for his courage in jumping from such a height. Han explained that telekinesis was a rare ability, which was why most psykers couldn't fly. He went on to discuss their strategy, instructing Kiro to control his descent speed to ensure their team's safety. Remembering this, Kiro kneels down, apologizing to Han for his broken arm, thinking that it happened because of him. In response, Han tells him not to apologize, stating that no one died and he surely did his best. Canute chimes in, reminding Kiro that his actions have successfully caused the captain of Squad 1 to fall. However, they feel glad that until Han's arm fully heals, they will not have any more scheduled battles. To their surprise, their wristwatches suddenly ring with a notification. They will be facing Squad 7 in an airborne battle in 2 days, leaving them shocked. Soki, receiving the same notification as Han, and his team, walks straight to the office of the head instructor, his frustration and questions filling his mind. In a discussion among themselves, Joyce expresses concerns that battling while injured will lead them to defeat, with Canute agreeing and anxious about facing Squad 7. Frustrated by this decision, Joyce calls it unfair and suggests they file a complaint. Meanwhile, the head instructor explains to Soki that the battle with Squad 7 has been arranged for them to win, questioning Soki's confidence in his victory. Soki responds that even without the disadvantage, his squad would have won, making the head instructor smile and urging him to ensure his victory. Leaving the office, Soki feels frustrated with the instructor for not listening to him as he walks away. Meanwhile, Han arrives at the training ground, stating that crying won't change anything, their focus should be on winning. He acknowledges that he hasn't devised a strategy yet but promises to create one to secure their victory before the battle. As they discuss this, Soki approaches them, remarking that Han's plans are fascinating, and he asks if Han will be okay with his broken arm. In response, Han raises his other arm, claiming it will be enough to defeat Squad 7. Soki reminds him of the difficulty of airborne battles and tells Han to keep it in mind. Han replies that he will prepare something unique for them and encourages Soki to do his best. Frustrated, Soki threatens to kill both Han and Kiro, but Han warns him against making empty threats. Frightened by Han's response, Soki angrily walks away, telling them to wait and see. while Han and his team remain unfazed. Acknowledging that Squad 7 won't be an easy opponent, Han instructs his team to head to the gym. Sometime later at the gym, all 4 of the team members practice operating their airbits, with Han unable to do that despite continuously trying, which makes him frustrated. Looking at Joyce, Han thinks that it is not going to be easy for him either, considering that he will have to use his combustion ability alongside telekinesis. Thinking that the only option left for them is to solely depend on Kiro like Squad 7, Han considers the heavy psychological pressure it will put on him, which he does not want to do. Considering the power of the members of Squad 7 and their strength in teamwork under the supervision of Soki, Han thinks that it will not be easy to defeat them in a head-on battle. Just then, Joyce calls out to him, stating that there is a problem and reveals that since there is nothing combustible in the air, his ability will not pose much threat to the opponent. In addition to that, he states that because everyone will be flying in the air quickly, it would be very difficult for him to target someone, causing Han to become silent. Watching them practice from a distance, the vice team leader of Squad 7 turns to Soki, stating that the skill level of their opponent shows that they do not need to worry about the battle. While Han tries to find a way for them to win, Soki thinks of a reason for them to lose, but both of them find none. 2 days later, all of the students gather in the hall again, surprised to find that Han and his group have another battle despite him being injured. Looking at the schedule in the opponent team, Dimitri realizes that Han's team is intentionally set up to lose. Remarking that Grossman is an awful person while Dell remains silent, Dell justifies the battle by explaining that Grossman aims to maintain a balance in winning probability for all squads, determining battles and opponents based on his analysis. Concerned about facing Squad 7, Dell wonders what strategy Han will employ this time. Facing Han and his team in the battling compartment, Soki vows to destroy them completely, showing them the consequences of being traitors. Meanwhile, Han turns to Joyce, inquiring about his condition, and Joyce assures him that he is more than ready to use his abilities and burn down everything, telling Han not to worry. In response, Han tells him to take good care of them, stating that he is the core of their battling strategy. Just then, the announcement to begin the battle is made, and both teams are instructed to launch their airbits. As they observe the number of airbits launched by Han's team, the entire hall falls into shock silence. Meanwhile, Soki stares at the 16 airbits floating in the air. Considering it impossible, he knows that an average person can control 2 airbits, and a skilled individual can manage up to 4, making this display utterly bewildering. Watching their expressions, Han smiles, remarking that he certainly looks very confused and asking to allow him to clear up his mind in a moment. Gazing at the 16 airbits suspended in the air, Squad 7 members become astonished, wondering if it's even possible. Soki, in the meantime, instructs them not to be swayed by the sight. He urges them to proceed according to the plan, emphasizing that they will calmly dismantle their opponents one by one. Meanwhile, Joyce and Canute jump onto the airbits and advance forward. As Han charges his hand with telekinesis, he reflects on how he never stopped honing his telekinetic abilities even during training. Despite his telekinesis being below average, Han believes he has acquired the skill to focus his powers where he desires. Gripping one of the airbits, he contemplates how he could use his ability for more than mere object control, possibly sending them flying even faster. Acting on this thought, he sends one airbit hurtling towards Soki, who reacts by evading it skillfully. At the same time, Joyce activates his combustion ability, recalling Han's strategy of using something combustible in the air. He directs his ignition powers at the airbit sent by Han, causing it to explode amid Soki's team, leaving them all stunned, wondering if they just witnessed an airbit explosion. Onlookers in the training hall comment on the expense but express excitement, urging Han's team to explode them all. Meanwhile, Han continues sending airbits towards Soki's group, while Joyce keeps directing his ignition powers, causing continuous blasts, which result in 2 Squad 7 members falling down. Recognizing the risk of exploding all their airbits, Soki urges the vice team leader to block the attacks, while the vice leader argues that getting closer might expose them to the explosions. Just then, the head instructors come running into the training hall, commanding them to stop the competition right away, calling Han to his office. The head instructor keeps silently staring at him, causing him to wonder if that was what he called him for. After some time, the instructor speaks up, asking if he is aware of the cost of one air bit. In response, Han states that he is aware of how expensive they are, causing the instructor to remark that if he were not a member of ARC, it would have taken a lifetime for him to pay that amount. Hearing that, Han asks if he was not called to inquire about his strategy. In response, the instructor states that it was not against the rules, but he should have realized that it was going to be highly controversial, stating that he is against such a strategy. The instructor tells him to inform him in advance if he ever plans on using such a strategy again in the future. Complying, Han states that he wants to ask one thing, which the instructor allows, stating that if they were battling dragons, Han asks if it would not be considered controversial or if he would ask about the cost of the air bits, emphasizing that they need to win no matter what. Han calls it the main point of their training. Grossman starts laughing, stating that he is speechless and that Han reminds him of someone he knows, remarking that it is a good attitude to have. Grossman states that he looks forward to his future competitions. With that, the head instructor dismisses Han, who leaves the office only to find Soki standing at the door. Soki recalls Han's strategy of exploding air bits, and then falling with him, asserting that even after winning, they won't impress anyone. Stating that it will be decided at a later time, Han asks if Soki was waiting outside just to say that, to which Soki becomes frustrated and denies it, claiming he was just passing by. As Han starts to walk away, Soki vows to trample on him and his team, urging them not to lose to anyone else until then. Sometime later, Han returns to his room where his team members await him at the dinner. As he gets inside, Kiro remarks that the battle was a victory for them, while Joyce shares his worry that their strategy might have gone against the rules. With a serious expression, Joy starts to look at his wristwatch, causing Kiro to ask if everything is all right. Joyce explains that they typically receive the announcement for their next competition during the feast, which is what he was checking. As expected, the announcement arrives, and it causes all of them to react differently. Upon reading that their next competition will be capturing the flag against Squad 5, realizing that Squad 5 is the team with Dimitri on it, who is even better than him in physical combat, Han thinks that Grossman really used his head to decide the schedule. Meanwhile, Dimitri walks out of the gymnasium after completing his daily workout and feels hot, thinking that he will take a shower immediately after getting to his room. Just then, he comes across a person who watches him, quickly starts to walk away, recognizing him to be the ex-squad leader of Squad 5. Dimitri stops him, stating that he cannot ignore him after ascending to level 3, and starts to inform him about the squad doing well. To his shock, the person responds by rudely telling him to get away before he is killed. Surprised at such an unexpected reply, Dimitri becomes excited, thinking that he will now surely get the details after fighting it out. Badly injured and exhausted from the battle, Han looks at the person approaching him from the front during the flag-obtaining competition, wondering who he is. Han realizes that the person wearing a skeleton mask and holding two swords is incredibly strong. When the person suddenly vanishes in front of him, suddenly appearing right next to him, the person hits Han with his sword, causing intense pain and making Han crash to the ground. 6 days ago, the head instructor called Han to his office and told him something that left him shocked. The instructor, stating that he couldn't reveal the details at that moment, informed Han that Dimitri had suddenly been injured and wouldn't be able to participate in the upcoming competition. However, he also mentioned that the competition would proceed as scheduled, leading Han to believe that Squad 5 without Dimitri would be like a headless chicken, giving them a free win. Setting that matter aside, the instructor showed Han certain documents, explaining the reason for summoning him. Han, taking the documents, asked about their contents, and the instructor revealed that they were all applications for squad transfer requests to his squad. The instructor explained that he had become famous for fairly utilizing his squad members, something Han had expected. Looking at the applications, he noticed that most of them were from people who had recently advanced to level 2 and wanted to become prominent. The instructor advised Han to take some time to consider this carefully, but Han readily accepted all of them into his squad, stating that he wasn't in a position to be selective. Sometime later, all 4 of the new squad members came to Han for an introduction, and he warmly welcomed them. Han informed them that they would begin preparing for the competition the next day, asking them to observe their specialty skills and choose roles accordingly, and inquired if anyone had objections. At that moment, one of them spoke to him in Korean, prompting Han to ask if there was a problem. In response, Zhang Jizhou, the individual, tried to take advantage of their shared nationality, requesting that Han take good care of him. In response, Han simply stated that their nationality didn't guarantee special treatment and that they needed to prove themselves with their skills, making him feel embarrassed. He then instructed them to leave, leaving Jizhou feeling annoyed and walking away in frustration, muttering something in Korean that left his companions confused. An hour before the actual incident, the flag-obtaining competition began with the downlit closing, plunging everything into darkness and confusing Han's team members. Han reassured them, reminding them that their opponents were in the same environment, and they only needed to wait for their eyes to adjust to the darkness. He explained their strategy, assigning Canute and his team to the actual action and Joyce and his team to back up. Meanwhile, Han, Kiro, and Jizhou were supposed to attack from the side. Despite Squad 5's perceived weakness without Dimitri, Han advised his team members not to let their guard down. 10 minutes earlier, the leading team made their entrance, followed by the backup team. Han and his group members, within 5 minutes, collectively eliminated all members of Squad 5. However, one of the group members pointed at a person sitting by the flag, suggesting that he is the sole remaining member who had quietly observed his team members getting defeated. Suddenly, the person got up and approached them, swiftly eliminating all of Han's team members, leaving Han shocked. Just then, Kiro pushed Han to the ground, warning him to be cautious, and took the hit directed at Han himself. Realizing that the person had teleportation abilities, Han watched as he moved swiftly. Thinking that there was no time to be surprised, he quickly took action, swinging his sword and causing the person to drift backward. Jizhou, the only remaining member of his group, attempted to approach, but the person executed a backflip in the air and kicked Jizhou with such force that he crashed to the ground. As the entire squad was eliminated, the people in the training hall wondered who was behind the skeleton mask, noting that he seemed to be a person known as Silence. Hearing the name Silence, the entire hall was surprised, realizing that he was indeed the same person. Dell recalled that Silence was the individual whose central nervous system had been damaged during training, rendering him unable to speak but granting him extraordinary strength. While everyone shared their thoughts about this mysterious person, Han retrieved his weapon from the ground, causing Silence to turn around. Han, unaware of Silence's identity, declared that he had no intention of losing, addressing him as Skeleton Mask. With that, he charged his hand with overwhelming energy and tightened his grip on his weapon. Observing this, the opponent also charged his entire body with overwhelming energy, preparing for the battle. Realizing that the person fighting against Han is a level 3 individual, which is on an entirely different level, Dell becomes surprised. He thinks that there is no possible way of winning against such a powerful individual and wonders what Han is going to do. Thinking that being unable to block the next attack by that person will cause them to lose, Han vows not to give up that easily. Therefore, before starting the battle, he decides to analyze the situation by remembering how he eliminated the rest of the group members. Considering the winning condition to be capturing the flag instead of taking down the individual, Han thinks that interrupting the person momentarily can lead him to victory. While the person becomes ready to run, Han concludes that he can interrupt the person while he is using his ability. With that, the person teleports once again and travels swiftly, and Han, in the same direction, appears right above him, leaning down to block the attack launched by the person. Han quickly gets up, making the person confused and attempting to launch a forceful punch. However, to his surprise, the person dodges the attack and launches a forceful kick, causing Han to crash to the ground. Putting his foot on Han's body, the person is about to strike him with a sword. When Han suddenly smiles and looks at the stick floating in the air, which comes toward the person at great speed, before the person can turn around to see it, the stick comes down swiftly and strikes the person, causing him to momentarily lose consciousness. After 3 seconds, when the person regains consciousness, he finds Han having already obtained the flag. Han remarks that this time was enough for him to win the competition. Turning to the person, Han smiles, declaring it to be their victory, which causes the entire training hall to shout out in surprise, while leaving Dell frustrated. The next morning, Kiro sits outside the dorm, giving food to a cat while remembering that there used to be a similar cat outside the orphanage. He recalls that because he had no friends and was considered an outcast, he used to spend time with the cat. However, he states that it is different now since he is not an outcast and has a lot of friends. When Jijo comes from behind, thinking Kiro is insane and calls him out, asking what he is doing, feeling a little embarrassed to see Jijo, Kiro asks why he is standing. Jijo states that he thought they should discuss something on their off day. Confused, Kiro gets up, asking what he wants to discuss, and Jijo explains that their squad currently does not have a vice leader, and he wants to volunteer for that and requires his support. Just then, the cat that was eating the food comes near Jijo, causing him to kick it away, leaving Kiro shocked. While Jijo tries to continue the conversation, Kiro, who is enraged by his act of kicking the cat, activates his powers, causing everything around them to shake badly. Looking at the dustbin behind them shaking badly, rising in the air, and then constricting like a paper ball, Jijo becomes scared while Kiro warns him never to do anything like that again. Frightened by his anger, Jijo agrees never to do anything like that again and crashes to the ground, trembling with fear. Meanwhile, Kiro runs to the cat, which goes away, having become frightened by the kick. Meanwhile, Han sits in a hospital room with Dmitri, who asks about the reason for his arrival. In response, Han states that he can only make assumptions since Ark keeps a lot of things secret and asks if it was a level 3 who did that to him. Agreeing, Dmitri reveals that their previous squad leader did that to him and remarks that a level 3 is definitely on a different level. He remembers that he could not even make a move before he was defeated, while Han notices his expression, realizing how sad and disappointed he is feeling. Dmitri reveals that the squad leader was not acting like himself, and it was as if he went insane. Hearing that, Han remarks that it is related to level 3 activities, noting that the level 3 facilities in Ark are quite lacking, and encountering them is very rare. Stating that they have to do a lot in order to finish their level 2 training, Han shares his belief that they will be able to fight in a real battle when they reach level 3, making Dmitri excited. Meanwhile, a person wearing a special armor suit comes out of a secret compartment, finding the same cat that was kicked by Jijo running behind the cat. Kiro also comes to the place. Happy to have found it, Kiro lifts it up, asking if it got hurt anywhere because of the kick and promising to give it more snacks. Just then, he turns around shocked to see the person standing in front of him, asking who he is. Hearing the person's voice, Kiro becomes a little confused. When the person removes his mask, revealing himself to be their level 1 instructor, John becomes equally surprised to see him. Stating that this is the Ark Development Center, John asks if he got lost, remarking that he has come too far. John takes a drink and gives it to Kiro, telling him to have it and wait until a car comes to take him back to his dorm, making him surprised by the special treatment. Confused at something, Kiro asks if he is not angry at him, causing John to ask if he was expecting him to be angry at coming there. John reveals that the armor he was wearing is a second-generation psycho frame that will be revealed soon, and it was not a problem for him to see it sooner. In response, Kiro states that their reinforced bodies are not allowed to leave the place until they are unable to battle because they are assets that belong to Ark. Agreeing, John states that the people who get angry for no apparent reason have very different personalities, causing Kiro to become a little embarrassed. Just then, an older person walks into the room, and asked how the test went, and John smiles, stating that it was as expected and that the response rate to psychic abilities was great. However, he suggests decreasing the amount of dragon material for the internal system since it would become harder for them to control. He states that, unlike them, the first-generation people like Kiro can manifest their psychic abilities as easily as breathing in air. In response, the person turns to Kiro, introducing himself as the chief of Team 1, Charlie Smith, shaking hands with him. Kiro also introduces himself, while John tells him that Charlie is the person who designed the psycho frame. Charlie explains that the first-generation psycho frame was put together in a rush and was a little crude, but the one made for the second generation is much better. Turning to Kiro, John states that it was something made for them. He himself can barely maneuver it, causing Kiro to realize that he will have to wear that suit and fight real battles. After some time, the vehicle arrives to escort him back to the dorms, and John takes him to the gate. After he leaves, John wonders what is going to happen to the mainframe he tested earlier that day. In response, Charlie states that it needs to be disassembled and recycled. for parts because they are always short on dragon material due to its rarity. Hearing that, John suggests leaving the suit for them, stating that there might be someone who would want to wear it. Despite the schedule of arc starting at 5 a.m., Han gets up at 4 a.m. to write down the strategies for the competition for that day. He thinks that his psychic powers are still below average and have a very low output. However, he recently discovered an ability that he can only use among people his age, which is absolute precision in using his psychic abilities. He discovers that he can outshine anyone else when it comes to psychic control and thinks that he should train harder to refine his precision. While he is thinking about that, he suddenly looks at his watch, realizing that it is about time to head out. Reaching the training ground, he starts running laps along with a few other people. Dmitri, who is also running beside him, calls out to him, causing Han to turn around and ask how the dimensional crack was, which he saw the previous day. In response, Dmitri remarks that it was a very enchanting location. Han remembers that the dimensional crack is a place that formed when the dragons attacked, and the gates were closed, and two groups made by the head instructor were told to go and see the place. The head instructor told them that it was the place where the Earth and another world were directly connected, and the theory was that it influenced the appearance of psykers. Revealing that it was formed about years ago, the instructor told them to go and see it, stating that there was no danger. Remembering that, Han turns to Dmitri, sharing his belief that psykers feel a strange sensation when they reach the place, and Dmitri agrees, revealing that they do feel a bit dazed. After completing the laps, Han instructs his squad members to gather at the helipad at 10 a.m., telling them to spend the remaining time however they like. Excited for the experience, Joy states that it feels like they are going on a field trip, while Han tells them all to go, and they leave as they all go away. John, the leader of Squad 10, arrives asking Han to have breakfast with him, causing Han to reply in a very friendly manner. Han remembers that after the silence was defeated by him, the head instructor did not pressure them to lose so openly, but they did lose to some of the squads, and Squad 10 was one of them. Walking inside, Han states that he always learns a lot from the strategy John uses, and he also wanted to have a chance to speak to him, causing John to act humbly in response. At the designated time, the students board the helicopters and start to move toward the dimensional crack. One of the instructors explains to them that it is one of the 6 places where gates opened, causing the dragons to cause devastation in Korea and China, leading them to get almost destroyed. He reveals that, due to the nuclear attack North Korea used to defeat the dragons, this caused a heavy loss, which led to their economy being completely destroyed. Hearing about Korea, one of the team members turns to Han, asking if it is the country from which he belongs, and Han agrees, stating that it is his birthplace. Sometime later, the helicopters finally arrive at the dimensional crack in Sinuago after approaching the crack. The rear hatch of the helipad is opened, causing all of the students to view it. As soon as Han is exposed to the overwhelming psychic energy of the dragon, he starts to feel intense pressure as if he is going to be swallowed whole any moment. As soon as the helicopters enter the dimensional zone, all of the group members start to feel tired and dizzy, wanting to go back and have a peaceful sleep. Meanwhile, now Han sits quietly, looking out of the window when he finds another helicopter flying beside them, carrying the members of Squad 10. Noticing him, John, the leader of Squad 10, also smiles and gives a thumbs up, causing Han to smile back in response. However, all of a sudden, overwhelming energy starts to emerge from the Squad 10 helicopter, causing it to blast. Shocked to see the sudden blast, Han wonders what type of light it was that obliterated the entire squad and remembers that John was a person whom he greeted for the first time in the morning. Just then, the instructor urgently calls out to Han, informing him of an emergency and instructing him to guide his squad members. In skydiving, the instructor reveals that the aircraft is going to crash soon and that he will contact headquarters for backup, urging Han to hurry, to which Han complies. Swiftly, donning their parachute bags, all the people aboard the helicopter start jumping one by one. As Han is about to jump, the instructor instructs him to assemble the squad members upon landing and wait for rescue. The instructor adds that if he can't join them, Han will be in charge of the team. Suddenly, a bright light engulfs the helicopter, causing it to explode. Just as Han jumps, moments later, Han opens his eyes, realizing he's alive, but he remembers that the instructor was killed in the blast. With his parachute caught in a tree, Han takes a deep breath and resolves to stay calm, knowing this is the kind of situation they were trained for, suspecting that there might be injured or panicked individuals. Han decides to follow the source of the smoke to locate them, thinking the smoke might indicate a crashed aircraft or a signal from Joyce. Han retrieves a knife and cuts the ropes of the parachute bag before jumping to the ground. As he senses movement in the bushes, he turns, brandishing his knife defensively, only to find Jizhou suddenly emerging, leaving him confused. Jizhou explains that while skydiving, he observed the aircraft and knew Han would be the last to jump, understanding the need to regroup with the squad leader first. Impressed by Jizhou's judgment, Han instructs him to follow and emphasizes the need to regroup quickly. With that, they proceed forward, breaking twigs and making marks on trees with the dagger to prevent losing their path. Eventually, they reach a fallen aircraft from Unit 2, realizing it was the helicopter carrying Squad 8. Opening the rear hatch of the helicopter, they find the lifeless bodies of all the squad members, realizing that they should have met a similar fate if they had not skydived. Feeling traumatized by the scene, Jizhou quickly runs out, while being surprised at Han's expressionless face, wondering if he is emotionless and asking if the scene did not affect him. In response, Han states that it's not the first time they've seen dead bodies and urges Jizhou to hurry and proceed forward to prevent further casualties. Suddenly, Han looks ahead of him and is shocked to find a werewolf above the helicopter. Calling out to Jizhou, Han tells him to find something useful in the aircraft, stating that he will distract the monster in the meantime. Hearing that, Jizhou asks if they cannot simply run away, but Han explains that this act will lead them to die since the monster has higher mobility than them. Just then, the werewolf jumps down toward Han and ensnares one of his arms, while he urges Jizhou to leave. Complying, Jizhou starts running toward the aircraft, while Han struggles to free himself from the monster's grasp. Watching Han's efforts, Jizhou realizes he needs to quickly run away instead of stopping. Meanwhile, Han uses his dagger to cut the monster's strong tentacles, snaring his arm, which rapidly regenerates, causing him to become anxious just as the monster is about to attack. A large broken piece of the helicopter hurtles toward it. Confused, Han turns to see Jizhou, who uses telekinesis to throw the debris at the werewolf while apologizing for the delay. While throwing the pieces of the helicopter toward the monster, Jizhou lifts his weapon made by tying a dagger at the tip of a rod, thinking that Han must notice his action and react accordingly. With that, he throws the weapon in Han's direction, although the werewolf approaches him, causing him to fall down. Opening its mouth, the monster is about to bite and kill him when the weapon pierces through its mouth, causing it to crash to the ground and die, while Han stands behind him, badly exhausted. As the monster crashes to the ground, Han starts to take deep breaths, relieved to have finally killed it. Stuck under the dead body of the monster, Jizhou confirms if it is lifeless, and Han agrees, commending him for his effort and helping him get up. Helping him move forward, Han tells him that the rescue team from Ark will reach the forest soon, telling him to endure it for a little longer. Meanwhile, the other members of his squad gather at one place and light the fire, expecting Han to see the smoke and come to them. They express their great faith in Han, confident that they can face any situation as long as he is with them since his strategies are the best. Looking at the amount of trust they have in their leader, the members of the other squads become astonished. Just then, they see the shadows of someone beside them and turn around expecting it to be Han, but find the members of Squad 9 instead, realizing that they are only 6 in number. Canute asks if they also skydived and got separated from each other, but they disagree. They reveal that they were ambushed, during which their instructor and squad leader died, and they were the only ones who managed to survive by running away. Just then, Han and Jizhou also come, while the Squad 9 members reveal that there were 3 hunter-type Ellis that were handling a werewolf like their hunting dog. Hearing that, the rest of them become anxious, wondering what they are going to do, thinking that they do not even have the weapons to fight at the moment. Telling everyone to calm down, Han states that he has a plan, asking everyone to lend in their strength. He states that even if the rescue team arrived as soon as possible, it would take at least 5 hours based on the distance until which they need to build a fort. 2 hours later, all the preparations are completed by building a fort using tree logs with fire burning on all its corners, which makes them wonder if it would not put them in danger. Thinking that all that is left is to wait, Canute turns to Han, asking what will happen if the rescue team arrives and gets hit by the same light, thinking that they might not know about the situation. Stating that they can think about it after they survive, he instructs him to focus on carrying out the plan for then. Hearing that, Canute wonders if the real battles are this bleak, realizing that the competitions they have gone through so far feel like child's play in this situation. Just then they hear a strange sound, which makes them all attentive, and Han calls out to Kiro, who activates his ability to form a protective shield above them. Realizing that Kiro possesses such an incredible ability, the other squad members wonder when he got it. Just then, Han calls out to them, telling them about a werewolf approaching from their side, commanding the group of people holding the spear to proceed forward. Han rushes to the monster heading the group himself. After getting their position, Han instructs the squad members to use their psychic abilities to toss their spears as if they were pushing them. Complying, all of them throw the spears in the werewolf's direction, causing it to get struck and lose some of its power. Taking advantage of the situation, Han climbs up on its body and strikes it with a spear, while Canute does the same from the other side. However, the werewolf quickly retaliates, hitting Canute with one of its tentacles, causing him to crash at a distance, leaving Han shocked. Telling them not to worry about him, Canute urges them to focus on the approaching monster who, after getting struck, grows furious. However, before it can attack them, the team members launch more spears in its direction that hit it, causing it to experience intense pain. After successfully killing the monster, Han turns to Kiro, asking where the next one is, and he informs them that there are two more approaching them from the opposite side. Hearing that, Han quickly calls out to Joyce, telling him to light the barricade, and he complies, causing the monsters to stop. Having bought a little time, Han instructs the ones holding the spears to target the monster that is approaching first. They follow, hitting it with multiple spears, causing it to fall in flames. With that, only one monster remains for them to kill. They hurl their spears toward the monster, but it shields itself with its back, causing them to wonder if it's going to wait until they are out of spears. Telling Jijo to follow him, Han rushes toward the monster and pierces his spear into its foot. Feeling intense pain due to the attack, the monster opens its mouth, letting out a scream, when Jijo pierces his spear into its mouth. While Jijo stands still after attacking, Kiro calls out to him, telling him to watch out, and Han pulls him back when the monster crashes to the ground, while attempting to launch a last attack, wondering if it was the monster's last attempt. Jijo becomes relieved that it only tore his clothes when a ray of light suddenly passes through his body, causing him to crash to the ground. Apologizing for that, Kiro states that they could not avoid everything and that it was better to be shot by an arrow than to be attacked by a werewolf. Considering the attack by an arrow, Han realizes that they must be Ellis hunters, and quickly instructs Kiro to locate them, stating that it is time to use the surprise attack team. Meanwhile, the last three members of their group, who act as Han's trump cards, hide in the bushes holding pieces of wood that they are going to use as air bits. They remember Han explaining that the Ellis hunters would show up themselves after confirming that they had utilized all their resources. Therefore, as soon as the hunters reach their destination, Kiro guides the team towards the creatures, and before the creatures can detect their presence, the team assassinates them all. After doing that, Kiro becomes extremely exhausted, stating that he does not have any more strength left and crashes to the ground, considering that they have used every strategy they could use. Han looks at the condition of his team members and thinks that they must leave the place before more opponents appear. However, just then he hears a loud voice and turns around in shock, finding countless werewolves approaching them. Looking at the werewolves approaching from all directions, Han and his group members stand with their backs turned towards each other. Thinking that the monsters are trying to surround them, Han realizes that they must have a leader somewhere and starts to look around. A few moments later, he is shocked to find a white fang emerging from the pack, recalling it to be a more intellectual one. Following its emergence, Han's body starts getting bound with the feeling of despair. Looking at the approaching wolves, he wonders what to do when he suddenly sees lights shining up in the sky, giving him hope of survival. He frees himself from the feeling of despair and turns to his team members, telling them to retrieve their spears, thinking that they only need to last a little longer. Kiro gathers his strength and activates his ability once again, while the rest of them start to fight against the monsters. A few moments later, a helicopter finally lands above the white fang. killing it and causing a strong wind to blow, making all of them cover their eyes. Just then, the lid of the helicopter opens, and a person steps down, revealing himself to be John Red, who states that it's a miracle that they survived this long. The next day, while watching his burned hand, Joyce remarks that it was certainly a miracle, and Canute agrees, stating that half of the troops died in the incident, and they managed to survive. Remembering the psycho frame worn by the instructors, Joyce remarks that it's incredible, and Canute agrees, stating that the monsters were difficult to kill and were easily sliced with it. However, he notes that everyone was cheering and shouting happily to have survived, yet amidst all that ruckus, Han stood quietly engrossed in thought with an expressionless face. Meanwhile, Han sits in his room, remembering that after returning from such an incident, the minor grudges between squads lost their value, uniting them all. He remembers that Soki came to him, saying that he used to hate him so much, but now he is relieved to see him alive. Soki stated that he has realized that he was never ready to kill anyone or watch anyone being killed and that they are not enemies, their real enemies are the monsters. While lost in thought, someone knocks at the door and then breaks the door with a bare fist, displaying a message on his wristwatch telling Han to come for a meeting. While following the person through the corridor, Han thinks that he managed to temporarily patch up the door of his room, but the strength of the person is astonishing. Thinking that, he calls out to Silence, asking who called him for a meeting. In response, Silence begins to type something on his wristwatch and then shows Han the text, revealing that he was called by John Red, and telling him to stop bothering him. Confused by the response, he wonders if Silence does not like him after their last competition. Sometime later, they enter the meeting room. Finding John sitting with Del, Han is surprised by his presence. John instructs him to take his seat, stating that the meeting is going to take some time. Remembering the meeting between the heads in which the death of a quarter of the level 2 was discussed during the incident, Alexander, the person presiding over the meeting, stated that they must question the commander in charge and reveal the truth behind this unprecedented damage to their assets. He remarked that it was the final decision of the Supreme Council, and all the responsibility was put on Grossman's shoulders. Moving to the actual topic, they discussed the incident, stating that from the footage of the helicopter cameras, they have concluded that the attacks were launched by the Ellis Mage. Hearing that, the instructors became surprised, remarking that it's the first time after the war that the Ellis Mages have shown up themselves. Considering that those creatures possess the ability to open up all the gates, they realized that the prophecy of the war might come true before the expected time. Therefore, it was suggested that they needed to awaken the Oracle. Remembering that, John states that they will have to form a team, for which the only left code letter is W, telling them to make a choice between White and Whiskey. Han wonders if he will have to make up a team with these individuals. While he is thinking about that, Silence types the word White on his wristwatch and shows it, following which Del and Han also choose White. Hearing that, John names their squad Whiskey, making them confused. He states that he will fill them in on their objectives, remembering that when Alexander remarked that it was better to awaken the Oracle at some later time when they desperately needed it, he agreed, asking for some time to be able to form a team. He suggested that they capture the Ellis and torture them, which is the easiest method to gather any intelligence about the enemy. Remembering this plan, John informs Han, Silence, and Del about it, stating that they are going to capture the Ellis Mages in Shinuiga. After the meeting, Han and Del are directed to Octo, who welcomes them and tells them to choose their standard dragon weapon while making sure to return them after using them. Taking a spear from the weapons, Han looks at them, wondering if this is how a dragon weapon looks when it begins to shine, making him confused. Smiling with confidence, Octo reveals that the weapon is storing their psychic energy. When Del asks if there is any other variety of the weapon available, like a narrower or longer blade, in response, Octo states that they can request a personalized weapon when they reach level 3. After that, he gives them an item resembling a ball, which begins to shine brightly in their hands, causing Han to ask if it is an air bit. Octo reveals that it is the smallest and lightest version of an air bit, which only has the option of personal maneuvering. Having gotten all of the necessary equipment, Han and all the other members of the team move towards the helicopter in order to begin the mission. Sometime later, they land at some distance from the dimensional crack and decide to walk to the operational area in order to avoid being bombarded. Revealing the name of the operation as catching wizard, John states that their sole objective is to catch the Ellis mage and return. He explains the search line order to be silence, him, Han, and Del, respectively. While proceeding forward, Han remembers the time when he asked John about the reason for including him in the mission despite there being so many level 3s who were stronger than him. In response, John stated that if he were looking at the overall combat ability, he would agree, but it was a different story from a strategic point of view, reminding him that the group he was leading managed to survive without having any equipment. John stated that this was his strength. Moreover, unlike all the other people who were in extreme trauma after coming back, which is normal, Han was completely fine, which made them view him as a monster or a psychopath. Remembering John's remark that the only thing he lacks is real-life battle experience, Han realizes why John selected Del and him for the mission. Meanwhile, Del continuously looks at him, remembering the time when he made his team win the competitions and even overpowered a level 3. Considering that, he vows to show Han and Silence who is the superior one during this operation. Just then, John calls out to him, stating that they will be taking turns to rest in a moment and divide themselves into 2 teams. Stopping at a distance, they start to build up a fort and stand to guard it while the first team comprising Han and Silence sit inside to rest. Looking at the forest in front of them, Han remembers his team members who were not able to return, in hopes they are still alive and inside despite the low chances. While remembering that, he suddenly notices Silence and feeling suffocated due to his helmet, tries to remove it, but at the next moment, he changes his mind and does not remove it, Han stating that he will turn around and asks why he does not remove his helmet. In response, Silence begins to type something on his wristwatch and shows him the message stating that he is not feeling hot. A few moments later, they start moving once again when John instructs them that from this point on their communication devices will not be working, due to which they will need to transfer to a local squad network. After surveying the surroundings for a moment, Silence finds 2 Ellis scouts at a distance and informs his team members about that. In response, all of them point their weapons towards the creatures while holding fire. Grabbing his sword tightly, Silence moves forward and slashes both of them right after getting the signal. Realizing that his efficiency in informing about the creatures was because of his pre-made messages on macros, John as well as all other team members get impressed. While discussing that, Silence suddenly senses the presence of more Ellis around him and turns around, finding 2 creatures at a distance. Grabbing his swords tightly, he is about to kill those creatures as well when Han stops him, stating that it would be better to follow them instead of killing them, causing John to ask why. Han explains that because they are heading in the direction of the crack and have their guard down, there is a high chance that they are returning from their scouting mission. Hearing that, John becomes impressed, remarking his observation to be excellent and telling Silence to follow them. Making Del jealous, realizing that he was also thinking about killing the creatures, Del vows to defeat Han in some way. Meanwhile, Silence, who has attached a camera to his helmet, follows the creatures from a distance until they reach near the crack and join in some other scouts in front of an Ellis mage. Looking at the gem at the end of the staff held by the mage, John reveals that it is a psychic crystal, which they must have studied about in their first year. Hearing that, both Han and Del realize that this is the type of crystal that allows one to store a massive amount of psychic energy and is the object they use to shoot down the aircraft. Judging from its brightness, John states that the crystal must be able to fire at least once more. Considering that their current opponents comprise 1 Ellis mage and 6 Ellis warriors, they think of themselves as lucky since there aren't any werewolves. Instructing all of the members to regroup with Silence, John announces the beginning of their mission of catching wizard, stating that the Ellis mages possess the ability of teleportation. John emphasizes the need to catch it before it can notice them and gives the responsibility to Silence. Meanwhile, the other members of the group, including himself, are supposed to eliminate the Ellis warriors with no room for mistakes. Determined to succeed in the mission, Han grabs his weapon tightly while trying to see what is lying in front of the altar. Realizing that the people lying in front of the mage are their fellow psykers, including 2 of his squad members, Han becomes enraged. Watching Han's expressions after seeing his squad members, John notices an overwhelming amount of psychic energy flowing out of him and wonders why he is behaving that way. He knows that such an overwhelming amount of psychic energy can put them in danger because of the ability of an Ellis mage to detect the energy. Thinking that it cannot be helped, John instructs all of the squad members to retreat, making them confused. Watching Han ignore the call, John thinks that he will have to look after him when the energy flowing out of him starts getting more and more intense, leaving him shocked. Having detected the psychic energy, the Ellis mage quickly turns around and is about to launch an attack, when John runs to Han and pushes him away, making him confused. As soon as Han falls to the ground, a powerful lightning strike hits the ground, damaging the entire forest, while injuring John, making Han shocked. Asking if he has finally come to his senses, John reveals his injured leg, stating that he is now no longer in the condition to fight and making him the second in charge, telling him to move. Feeling frustrated because of his mistake, Han connects with his squad members, telling them to cover them while they are retreating. With that, he holds John up and starts to move backward while feeling too exhausted. Uttering a few words in a strange language, the Ellis mage commands his warriors to follow and catch them. However, before they can do that, silence blocks their way, killing all of them one by one at a swift speed. Standing at a little distance, Del also opens fire, shooting the ones who manage to escape Silence's attacks. However, considering that the bullets are not effective against the creatures, he drops the gun and uses telekinesis to raise huge rocks from the earth, bringing the rocks exactly parallel to the creatures. He launches an attack, causing the rocks to hit the monsters, making them crash to the ground. However, because his attack takes time, some of the monsters still manage to reach him and raise their weapons in the air, causing him to wonder if this is the end. However, before the monsters can attack him, Silence uses his teleportation ability to reach the monsters and slash them from behind, leaving Del astonished. Just then, the mage starts to give another command to the warriors, causing them to turn around and walk towards the crack. Realizing that the creatures have given up on coming after them, Del and Silence move towards Han, who stands still and states that it is all his fault. Enraged at him for destroying their plan, Silence goes near him and punches his face so hard that he crashes to the ground. Stopping him from doing that, Del states that they cannot proceed with the plan anymore since doing that will make the situation worse for them. Therefore, he suggests that they should retreat, but Han disagrees, stating that they will stick to the plan. Then Silence frees up his hand from Del's grasp and goes near Han, hitting him once again. Forcefully stopping him from doing that, Del states that Han is their commander at the moment and tells him to stop reacting like that. Hearing that, Silence backs away and stands still, folding his arms. Del then turns to Han, reminding him that it is only because of him that the situation has turned out to be like that and threatening to beat him badly if his plan fails. Stating that he will decide after hearing his plan, Del remarks that Han surely has the best ability for strategizing among all of them. In response, Han stands up, telling them to listen silently and states that the situation is not that bad. Causing them to feel annoyed, he states that the only reason they were urged to proceed was because of the psychic crystal of the mage and his teleportation powers, both of which they no longer need to worry about. Agreeing, Del states that the mage has used the last blast it could but asks why it would not use teleportation. In response, Han explains that these creatures have been hiding for the last 10 years out of caution but are now putting their lives at stake in order to continue the formation. Considering that they tried their best to eliminate them and the warriors returned instead of following them, Han states that there is something special that is stopping them from leaving the place. Hearing that, both Del and Silence stay quiet and look at each other for a while and then agree, asking him to tell his plan. Holding his air bit, Han states that he is going to capture the Ellis mage by ambushing them from across the dimensional crack. Telling Del and Silence to distract them from the front, Han states that even if the mage senses the psychic energy since it will be coming from across the crack, it will be difficult to be detected. Moreover, he states that the mage's vision will be blurred because of the light emerging from the crack. In response, Del argues that he is going to experience the same because he also felt pressure from the crack when they came for the first time. Highlighting that, Del warns him not to make any mistakes, and Han assures him that he is confident in his psychic controlling ability. He states that the reason he is volunteering to do that is not to cover up his mistake but because he knows that he is the most likely one to succeed.